Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Do you know that feeling when something is wrong, but you can't quite figure out what it is? Mason Patel felt exactly that on November 14, 2019 at 2:47 a.m. when he looked at the radar screen for the fourth time in 3 minutes. The green light scanned the empty space. There was nothing there, but he couldn't take his eyes off the window overlooking runway 27. There was a light that shouldn't have been there. Mason had been an air traffic controller at Richmond International Airport for 11 years. He had seen it all: emergency landings, drunk pilots, bird strikes. He had guided planes through fog so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. But in all that time, and all the night shifts he had worked, he had never seen anything like this flying down the approach path to runway 27. Tower, this is Delta 2347. We are approaching runway 27. Can you confirm the lights? There is something unusual at 12 o'clock. Mason's hand moved to the radio almost automatically. His voice came out steady, professional, even though his pulse had just kicked up a notch. Delta 2347 Tower. All runway lighting systems are operating normally. Can you describe what you're seeing? There was a pause. In that pause, Mason heard the co-pilot say something in the background. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Confusion. Maybe concern. Tower, we've got a stationary white light approximately 2 miles from runway threshold, roughly 500 feet altitude. It's not moving with the wind. It's just sitting there. Mason's eyes locked onto the window. From his position in the tower, 70 feet above ground level, he had a clear view of the entire airfield. Runway 27 stretched out to his left. A dark ribbon lined with blue edge lights and white centerline lights. At the far end, the approach lighting system glowed like a path of stars leading aircraft home. And beyond that, maybe a quarter-mile past the runway threshold, there it was. A sphere of white light. Perfectly round, perfectly still, just hanging in the air like someone had nailed a star to the sky and forgotten to take it down. Delta 2347, I have visual on the light. Stand by. Mason turned to his colleague. Sarah Johnson, no, wait. Sarah wasn't working that night. It was someone else. He couldn't quite remember who. The memory felt slippery, like trying to hold water in your hands. Mason grabbed the phone that connected directly to the operations supervisor. We've got a situation on 27. Unknown light source on the approach path. Aircraft is requesting guidance. Copy that. I'm pulling up the cameras now. Mason returned to the radio. Delta 2347. For your safety, I'm going to vector you to hold. Turn right heading 310. Maintain 3,000 feet. Understood. Turning right to 310. Tower, that light is getting brighter. It's significantly brighter than when we first spotted it. Mason's stomach tightened. The light was indeed brighter now. What had been a pinpoint glow was now the size of a street light, maybe bigger. It cast a pale illumination on the grass beneath it. But the light didn't seem to spread the way normal light should. It just pooled directly under the sphere, like the photons were afraid to travel too far from their source. Delta 2347, maintain your heading. We're investigating. Are we looking at a drone here, Tower? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Mason had dealt with drone incursions before. Last summer, some kid had flown a quadcopter near the approach path and they'd had to divert 3 flights. But drones didn't just hover motionless in 25-knot winds. Drones had blinking lights. Drones showed up on radar. Mason's eyes dropped to his screen again. The green sweep painted the Delta flight perfectly, a bright return with the transponder code clear as day. But in the space where that light hung in the air, nothing. Not even ground clutter, just empty air. Possible drone, Mason replied, keeping his voice neutral. We're assessing now. The operations supervisor, a man named Gerald Kowalski, appeared at Mason's elbow. Gerald was 62, 3 months from retirement, and had been working at RIC since before Mason was born. If anyone had seen something like this before, it would be Gerald. "What are we looking at?" Gerald asked, his eyes already scanning the runway through the tower windows. Mason pointed. "That." Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's not a drone." "Yeah, I know. That's not anything." "I know." Gerald moved to the backup radar console, his thick fingers dancing across the controls with surprising speed. He cycled through different radar modes: primary, secondary, weather. Each sweep showed the same thing: Delta 2347 in the holding pattern, ground vehicles near the terminal, a small aircraft departing from the parallel runway. And where the light hung suspended in the November darkness, absolutely nothing. Could be something non-metallic, Gerald muttered, but his voice carried no conviction. Weather balloon, maybe. In 25-knot winds? Stationary? No, you're right, not a balloon. They stood there, these two men who had devoted their careers to the orderly movement of aircraft, and stared at something that defied every rule in their playbook. The light was brighter still now, bright enough that Mason had to squint when he looked directly at it. It had gone from white to a pale blue-white, like a welding arc or a bolt of lightning frozen in time. "Tower, Delta 2347. We're not going to lie to you here. This is making everyone pretty uncomfortable. First Officer Collins says she's never seen anything like it." First Officer Avery Collins. Mason made a mental note of the name. Witnesses. Documentation. If this thing stayed where it was, they'd need statements from everyone. "Delta 2347, we understand your concern. We're working with operations to identify the object. Your safety is our priority. Continue holding on current heading." "Copy that, Tower. And, just for the record, whatever that thing is, it's maintaining exact altitude and position despite significant wind shear at our altitude. I don't know what it's attached to, but it's not drifting." Mason's hand was shaking slightly as he keyed the intercom to the ground operations frequency. "Ground, Tower. We need security to check the area beyond the 27 threshold. We've got an unknown object on the approach path." "Copy, Tower. Dispatching now." Through the windows, Mason watched a white pickup truck with flashing amber lights pull away from the operations building. It turned onto the perimeter road, headlights cutting through the darkness as it headed toward runway 27. The driver would have a closer look at whatever that thing was. Maybe up close it would make sense. Maybe it was just some kind of balloon or lantern or... The light moved, not much. Maybe 20 feet to the left. But it moved instantaneously, like someone had cut a frame out of a film. One moment it was in position A, the next it was in position B, with no transition between. "Jesus Christ," Gerald whispered. "Tower, did you see that?" First Officer Collins' voice cracked slightly over the radio. "That light just teleported. It didn't move, it jumped." Mason's training kicked in, overriding the primal unease crawling up his spine. "Delta 2347, I confirm the light changed position. Continue your hold. Ground security is approaching the area now." The security truck had stopped about a quarter-mile from the light. Mason could see the driver's door open, a figure step out. Even from this distance he could see the security guard standing motionless, staring up at the object. Mason grabbed the phone. "Security, Tower. Do you have eyes on the light source? The voice that came back was young, maybe mid-20s. Tower, Security 4. Yeah, I've got eyes on it. I've got real good eyes on it. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know what the hell that is. Can you describe it? It's a sphere, bright white, maybe 8 feet in diameter, maybe bigger. Hard to tell distance at night. It's making no sound, none. I killed my engine and rolled down the window. There's nothing. Not a hum, not a buzz, nothing. And it's just sitting there in the air. There's nothing holding it up, nothing. Mason exchanged a look with Gerald. The older man's face had gone pale. Security 4, can you see any support structure? Wires, cables, anything? Negative. There's nothing. It's just floating. And, Tower, I'm going to be honest with you, every instinct I have is telling me to get back in this truck and drive away real fast. Maintain your position, Security 4. Do not approach the object. You don't have to tell me twice. For the next 3 minutes, nothing happened. The light hung there, that impossible sphere of illumination that shouldn't exist. Delta 2347 continued its racetrack holding pattern, burning fuel while Mason tried to figure out what to do. 2 more flights were in the queue for runway 27. In 15 minutes, they'd have to make a decision: divert them to the parallel runway or send them somewhere else entirely. Then the light began to ascend. Slowly at first, rising vertically like an elevator. 50 feet, 100 feet, 200. It maintained its perfect spherical shape. Its blue-white glow, its absolute silence. The security guard's voice came over the radio, awed and frightened at the same time. Tower, it's going up. It's going straight up. I'm tracking it with my spotlight and, Jesus, it's accelerating. It's really moving now. Mason pressed his face close to the window glass, tilting his head back to follow the light's ascent. It was climbing faster now, much faster. 1,000 feet, 2,000, 3,000. It passed through the altitude of Delta 2347, now 5 miles away in its holding pattern, and kept going. Tower, we've got visual on that light passing through our altitude, Collins reported. It's moving at a high rate of speed, vertical ascent, no horizontal component whatsoever. 4,000 feet, 5,000. The light was dimming now, not because it was less bright, but simply because it was getting farther away. 6,000 feet. 7,000. Mason lost sight of it somewhere around 8,000 feet, the sphere finally small enough to blend in with the scattered stars visible between the clouds. And then it was gone. The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Collins' voice, steadier now. Tower, Delta 2347. The object is no longer visible. Requesting clearance to resume approach. Mason's mouth was dry. His heart was hammering against his ribs. Next to him, Gerald was gripping the edge of the console so hard his knuckles had gone white. Delta 2347, you're cleared for approach runway 27. Descend and maintain 2500 feet. Turn left, heading 270. Cleared approach runway 27, descending to 2000, turning left to 270. Tower, for the record, I've been flying for 17 years and I've never seen anything like that. Not even close. Noted, Delta 2347. We'll be filing a full report. The Boeing 757 made its approach without incident, touching down softly on runway 27's threshold 12 minutes later. By then, the night had returned to its normal routine. More flights came and went. The security guard returned to his patrol. Gerald disappeared into the back office to start the incident paperwork. And Mason stood at his station, staring out at runway 27, wondering what the hell he was going to write in his report. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the light hadn't really left. Not entirely. and the events of that November night were just the beginning. The official report filed by Richmond International Airport that night was exactly 4 pages long. Mason Patel spent 2 hours on it, choosing every word with the care of a man defusing a bomb. He described the light as unidentified aerial phenomenon, the movement as unusual flight characteristics, and the radar data as inconclusive. He attached First Officer Avery Collins's statement, the security guard's report, and Gerald Kowalski's observations. He did not use the word UFO. He definitely did not use the word spacecraft. He stuck to the facts, dry and clinical, because that's what you did when something impossible happened. You wrote it down like it was normal, filed it away, and hoped nobody asked too many questions. 3 days later, on November 17th, Mason received a phone call at home. "Mr. Patel, this is Richard Vance from the FAA Regional Investigations Office. I'd like to discuss your report from the night of November 14th. Mason had been expecting this. The FAA didn't call about mundane incidents. But the fact that they were calling his personal number at 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening sent a small spike of anxiety through his chest. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "I'd like you to walk me through exactly what you saw, not what you wrote in the report, what you actually saw." Mason sat down on his couch, beer forgotten on the coffee table. "I saw a light, spherical, bright white changing to blue-white, approximately 8 feet in diameter. It was stationary over the approach path to runway 27, maintained position in 25-knot winds, showed no radar return, and eventually ascended vertically at high speed until it disappeared from sight." "And the aircraft, Delta 2347? The crew confirmed visual contact. First Officer Collins described it as teleporting when it moved position. There was a pause on the other end. Mason could hear typing. "Mr. Patel, I'm looking at weather data from that night. Clear conditions, visibility 10 miles, winds from 250 at 25 knots gusting to 32. No weather phenomena that could explain a stationary light source." "That's correct. I'm also looking at radar data from 3 different installations: your airport, Norfolk Approach Control, and Atlantic City Center. None of them show any return in the area you described." "Also correct. So, what we have here is a visual sighting by multiple trained observers. Yourself, Mr. Kowalski, the security officer, and the flight crew of Delta 2347, of an object that appears to defy physics and doesn't show up on any conventional tracking system." "That's an accurate summary. Yes." Another pause. Then, "Mr. Patel, I'm going to be direct with you. This is the 3rd report we've received in the past 6 weeks of similar phenomena near commercial airports. Logan International had one on October the 2nd. LaGuardia had one on October 28th. And now yours. The details are remarkably consistent. Spherical lights, stationary despite high winds, no radar returns, sudden vertical ascent." Mason felt his stomach drop. 3 reports in 6 weeks? 3 that have been officially filed. We suspect there are others that weren't reported. Pilots are reluctant to file these kinds of reports. Bad for the career. What do you think they are? I don't know. That's the honest answer. But I need you to do something for me. If you see this again, or if anyone on your team sees something similar, I need you to call me immediately. Not after your shift. Not the next day. Immediately. Can you do that? Mason wrote down Vance's direct number on a notepad. I can do that. Good. And Mr. Patel? Keep this conversation between us. The FAA is taking these reports seriously, but we're not ready to make any public statements. The last thing we need is panic. The call ended. Mason sat in his living room for a long time, staring at the phone number he'd written down. trying to process what he'd just learned. 3 airports, 3 sightings, similar characteristics. What the hell was going on? He didn't have to wait long for an answer. 17 days later, on December 4th, Mason was back on the night shift. It was 11:43 p.m., and the tower was quiet. Most of the commercial traffic had wrapped up for the night. They had 2 cargo flights inbound in the next hour, and a private jet that had filed for departure at midnight. Otherwise, the airport was essentially asleep. Mason was reviewing tomorrow's weather forecast when Gerald's voice cut through the quiet. "Mason, look at runway 27. The tone in Gerald's voice made Mason's head snap up. And there it was again, the light, same position, same altitude, same impossible stillness. Maybe 2 miles from the runway threshold, about 500 feet up, a perfect sphere of white light hanging in the December darkness, like God had dropped a pearl and forgotten to pick it up. Mason's hand was already reaching for the phone. He dialed Richard Vance's number from memory. "Vance? Richard. It's Mason Patel at Richmond. It's here again." "The light?" "Yes. Exact same position as last time. I'm looking at it right now." "Do you have any aircraft in the area?" "Negative. Nothing on approach. Nothing in the pattern." "I'll make some calls. Keep watching it. Take video if you can. I'll call you back." Mason hung up and pulled out his personal phone, switching it to video mode. His hands were steadier this time. The shock of the first encounter had worn off, replaced by a professional focus. Document everything. That's what Vance had said. "Gerald, can you pull up the external cameras? I want multiple angles. Already on it." For the next 7 minutes they watched. The light didn't move, didn't dim, didn't do anything. It just existed, a small sun suspended in the November air, mocking every law of physics Mason had ever learned. Then it happened again. The light jumped, same as before. No transition, no movement, just instantaneous relocation. One moment it was at position A, the next it was 30 feet to the right at position B. A microsecond later, it jumped again, this time back and slightly up. "It's like it's glitching," Gerald whispered. "Like reality is stuttering." Mason kept his phone camera trained on the sphere. On the small screen he could see the light flickering between positions, each jump precise and instantaneous. This wasn't movement. This was something else. Something that made his engineer's brain hurt just trying to comprehend. His phone rang. Vance. "Mason, I've got Andrews Air Force Base on alert. They're scrambling an F-16 to your location. ETA 12 minutes. Copy that. The light is exhibiting the same displacement behavior as last time. Instantaneous position changes. The pilot is equipped with FLIR cameras. Whatever this thing is, we'll get it documented." The next 12 minutes felt like 12 hours. Mason and Gerald stood at the windows, watching the light continue its bizarre, stuttering dance. Jump. Pause. Jump. Pause. Sometimes it moved a few feet, sometimes 100 yards, but always instantaneous, always perfectly controlled. Then Mason heard it, the distinctive whine of an F-16's engines at full military power. The fighter came in from the northeast, a dark shape moving fast across the night sky. As it approached runway 27, the pilot's voice came over the emergency frequency that Mason had tuned to. "Richmond Tower, Viper 31. I have visual on your anomaly, bearing 270, range 3 miles, approaching for closer observation. Copy, Viper 31. Use caution." The F-16 closed the distance quickly. In seconds, it was less than a mile from the sphere, slowing down, the pilot clearly trying to get a good look at whatever this thing was. Mason watched through binoculars, his heart pounding. The instant the fighter got within half a mile of the light, the sphere shot upward. Not the slow ascent of last time. This was acceleration that violated every principle of aerodynamics Mason knew. 0 to supersonic in less than a second. The light streaked straight up like a tracer round, leaving a faint blue afterglow in its wake. Viper 31, what's your status? Richmond, that thing just... Jesus, I've never seen anything accelerate like that. I'm tracking it on radar now. Altitude 40,000 feet and climbing. Speed is... This can't be right. My instruments are showing Mach 4 and accelerating. Stay with it if you can. Negative, tower. Whatever that thing is, it's gone. Altitude now 65,000 feet. Speed Mach 7. 8. Jesus Christ. It's off my scope. Viper 31 returning to base. Mason lowered the binoculars. His hands were shaking again. Mach 8. That was over 6,000 miles per hour. The fastest aircraft ever built could barely touch Mach 3. Whatever that light was, it had just treated the sound barrier like a suggestion. His phone rang again. Vance's voice was tight, controlled. Mason, did your tower cameras catch that? Every second. Good. Save everything. I'm sending a team to collect the footage tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I need you to understand something. This incident is now classified under Investigation Protocol Echo 7. That means you don't talk about this with anyone outside official channels. Not other controllers. Not your family. Not your friends. Are we clear? What's going on, Richard? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's bigger than we thought. Much bigger. The line went dead. Mason stood in the tower, surrounded by screens and radios and all the technological achievements that had made modern aviation possible, and felt very small. Gerald had gone pale, his retirement-weathered face slack with shock. What do we do now? The older man asked. Mason looked out at runway 27, at the empty space where impossible things kept appearing. We do our jobs, we keep the plane safe, and we don't talk about this. For how long? For as long as they tell us to. But staying silent was harder than either of them expected, because the lights didn't stop. Over the next 3 weeks, the phenomena appeared 6 more times at Richmond International, always at night, always over or near runway 27, always exhibiting the same physics-defying characteristics, and each time Mason made the call. Each time the FAA documented everything. Each time they told him to keep quiet. The other controllers noticed. How could they not? You can't have multiple military intercepts at a civilian airport without people asking questions. Mason deflected when he could, claimed classified security drills when he couldn't. But he could see the doubt in their eyes. They knew something was happening. They just didn't know what. Avery Collins called him on December 28th. She'd gotten his number from the FAA report, wanted to compare notes. They met at a coffee shop in downtown Richmond. 2 aviation professionals bound by shared experience of something that shouldn't exist. I can't stop thinking about it, Collins said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. That night, the way it moved, I keep running through every possible explanation and nothing fits. I know. My captain thinks I imagined it. He filed the report because regulations required it, but he thinks it was some kind of optical illusion. Reflections from ground lights, swamp gas, Venus. He's gone through every debunking argument in the book. But you know what you saw. I know what I saw. She looked up at him, and Mason saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. And I've seen it again. Mason's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. What? Twice. Once on approach to LaGuardia 3 weeks ago. Once near O'Hare last week. Different aircraft, different flights, but the same thing. Same spherical light, same impossible behavior. And nobody's talking about it, Mason. The pilots see it, report it on internal channels, and then nothing. The reports disappear into some FAA black hole, and that's the end of it. How many sightings are we talking about? I've personally heard about 15 in the past 2 months, and those are just the ones pilots are willing to whisper about in crew lounges. I think the real number is higher, a lot higher. Mason set his coffee down carefully. Jesus, what's happening? I don't know, but whatever it is, the FAA doesn't want people talking about it. They sat in silence for a moment, two small humans trying to make sense of something vast and incomprehensible. Finally, Collins spoke again. I have a friend at NARCAP, the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena. They're independent, not government. They investigate these kinds of incidents. Maybe we should— No. Mason's voice was sharp. Too sharp. He softened it. I signed documentation. Protocol Echo 7. If I violate that, I lose my career, maybe worse. So we just ignore it? We do our jobs. We keep people safe, that's all we can do. Collins nodded slowly, but Mason could see she didn't like it any more than he did. They talked for another 20 minutes about safer topics: weather, aircraft types, crazy passenger stories. But the light hung between them, unspoken. When they parted ways, Mason drove home through Richmond's quiet streets and wondered how many other people were having the same conversation in cities across America. How many pilots and controllers and tower personnel were sitting in coffee shops and bars, speaking in low voices about things they'd seen that shouldn't exist. And more importantly, what were these lights? Where did they come from? And what did they want? He didn't know it then, but he was about to find out. The answer came on January 17, 2020, but not in any form Mason Patel expected. He was at home on his day off, trying to relax with a beer and a documentary about the International Space Station when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mason Patel, speaking. My name is Dr. Elena Rodriguez. I'm an aerospace engineer with the National Reconnaissance Office. I need to speak with you about the incidents at Richmond International. Mason sat up straight. The National Reconnaissance Office. That was the spy satellite people. Why the hell were they calling him? I'm not authorized to discuss those incidents with unauthorized personnel. I know about Protocol Echo 7, Mr. Patel. I'm calling because I have authorization that supersedes it, and because you're in danger. That got his attention. Danger? What kind of danger? Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's a rest stop on I-95, mile marker 84, 2:00 p.m. Every instinct Mason had told him this was a bad idea. Meeting random people at highway rest stops to discuss classified incidents. That was how spy thrillers started. Not real life. But another part of him, the part that had watched those lights dance in the sky, that had seen an object accelerate to Mach 8 in seconds, that part needed answers. I'll be there. The rest stop was busy when Mason arrived at 1:55 p.m. Families on road trips, truckers grabbing coffee, travelers walking dogs in the designated pet area. He bought a Coke from the vending machine and sat at a picnic table, feeling ridiculous. At exactly 2:00 p.m., a woman in her late 40s approached. Dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face that belonged in a university lecture hall or a government laboratory. She sat down across from him without asking permission. Mr. Patel, thank you for coming. Show me credentials. She pulled out a badge. NRSO, just like she'd said. Elena Rodriguez, Ph.D., Senior Research Analyst. It looked legitimate, but Mason had no way to verify it. What's this about, de Rodriguez? The lights you've been seeing, they're not what you think they are. And what do I think they are? Drones, experimental aircraft, foreign technology, weather phenomena, every rational explanation your mind has been cycling through for the past 2 months. She leaned forward. You're wrong. All of those explanations are wrong. Then what are they? We don't know. She said it flatly, without embarrassment. The NRO has been tracking similar phenomena for 18 months. We've documented over 200 incidents at 57 different airports worldwide. The behavior is consistent. Spherical lights, no radar signature, physics-defying movement, apparent interest in aviation infrastructure. Mason's mouth had gone dry. 200 incidents? And those are just the ones we know about. The real number is probably 3 or 4 times higher. Most pilots don't report because they're afraid of being grounded for psychological evaluation. Most controllers don't report because they don't want to lose their jobs. You're one of the few who've been honest enough to document it properly. Why are you telling me this? Dr. Rodriguez pulled out a tablet, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. The screen showed a map of the United States, dotted with red markers. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. These are confirmed sightings in the past year. Notice anything? Mason studied the map. The markers were concentrated around major airports, but not randomly. There was a pattern, a progression, starting on the West Coast in early 2019, moving gradually eastward. By December, the concentration was highest in the Mid-Atlantic region. By January, it's moving toward Washington, D.C., Mason whispered. Yes, whatever this phenomenon is, it appears to be conducting systematic reconnaissance of American aviation infrastructure working from west to east. Richmond International isn't random, Mr. Patel. It's part of a pattern. Reconnaissance for what? That's the question, isn't it? She took the tablet back. We have 3 working theories at NRO. Theory 1, foreign adversary testing advanced drone technology. Theory 2, classified U.S. military program that's gone off script. Theory 3, she paused. Theory 3 is more complicated. Tell me. Theory 3 is that we're dealing with non-human intelligence conducting surveillance of our aerospace capabilities. There it was. The word nobody wanted to say. The explanation that made all the others seem quaint. Mason had danced around it in his own mind for weeks, pushed it aside as crazy, too science fiction, too impossible. But hearing it spoken aloud by a government scientist made it suddenly terrifyingly real. You're talking about aliens. I'm talking about something that doesn't match any human technology, past or present. Something that can accelerate to hypersonic speeds instantaneously. Something that can maintain perfect position in high winds without any visible propulsion. Something that seems very interested in watching how we operate our aircraft. She met his eyes. Yes, Mr. Patel, I'm talking about the possibility of non-human intelligence. Mason stared at her for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? Because last week, we detected a change in the pattern. The phenomena are no longer just observing. They're starting to interact. She tapped the tablet again. Security camera footage from an airport tower, timestamp showing January 9th, 2020. Mason watched as a spherical light appeared in frame, hovering near a taxiway. An aircraft, looked like a 737, was holding short of the runway. As Mason watched, the sphere moved closer to the aircraft. 50 feet away, 20 feet, 10 feet. And then it stopped, hovering directly in front of the cockpit windows. For 30 seconds, the light held position while the aircraft sat motionless on the taxiway. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the sphere shot straight up and vanished. This was Denver International, Dr. Rodriguez said quietly. The pilots reported that all their instruments went haywire when that sphere approached. Radio dead, navigation systems offline. Even the backup systems failed. Then the light left and everything came back online. No damage, no lasting effects. But for 30 seconds, that aircraft was completely dead in the water. Jesus Christ. There have been 4 similar incidents in the past week. Same behavior. Approach aircraft, systems failure, departure. Whatever these things are, they're testing our responses, probing our defenses, and they're getting bolder. Mason's mind was reeling. What does the FAA want us to do? The FAA has been instructed to maintain operational security and avoid public panic. Official policy is still to classify these as unexplained aerial phenomena and file them away. But unofficially? She looked at him intently. Unofficially, we're scared. We have no idea what these things are capable of. We don't know if they're hostile or benign. We don't know what they want, and we're running out of time to figure it out. Why me? Why are you telling me all this? Because Richmond International is going to be important. The pattern suggests the phenomena will appear there again within the next 2 weeks, possibly multiple times. And when it does, I need someone on the ground who understands what they're really seeing. Someone who won't panic. Someone who can document everything without letting fear cloud their judgment. She pulled a card from her pocket and slid it across the table. It had a phone number, nothing else. If you see those lights again, call that number immediately. Not Richard Vance, not the FAA. That number connects directly to a response team at NRO. We'll have assets in position to gather data, satellites, high-altitude reconnaissance, spectral analysis. But we need real-time notification. Can you do that? Mason picked up the card, felt its weight in his fingers. Such a small thing, such enormous implications. What happens if I say no? Then I find someone else. But I chose you because your record says you're reliable, professional, and not prone to hysteria. Those are rare qualities, Mr. Patel, especially in situations like this. Mason thought about Gerald's pale face after that first encounter, thought about Avery Collins's fear at the coffee shop, thought about all the other controllers and pilots who'd seen these things and been told to keep quiet, to file it away, to pretend it never happened. If I do this, he said slowly, I want something in return. Name it. When this is over, when you figure out what these things are, I want the truth. No classified briefings, no national security excuses. I want to know what we've been dealing with. Dr. Rodriguez smiled, but it was a sad smile. I can promise you'll get the truth, Mr. Patel. I can't promise you'll like it. Deal. They shook hands. 2 people, bound by shared knowledge of something vast and terrifying, making a pact over a cheap picnic table at a highway rest stop when Dr. Rodriguez walked away. Mason sat for a while longer, watching families and truckers and travelers go about their normal lives, blissfully unaware that the world had become stranger than they could imagine. He didn't have to wait 2 weeks. The lights returned to Richmond International that very night. Mason was back on shift at 11 p.m., the NRO card tucked in his wallet like a talisman. The evening had been routine. 3 arrivals, 2 departures, the usual rhythm of commercial aviation winding down for the night. Gerald was on break. The tower was quiet. At 1:47 a.m., Mason glanced out toward runway 27 and felt his stomach drop. Not 1 light this time, 7. They hung in formation, a perfect geometric pattern, 6 spheres arranged in a hexagon with 1 in the center, each glowing that same blue-white brilliance, each maintaining exact position despite the wind. And they were lower than before, maybe 300 feet up, close enough that Mason could see them reflecting off the runway surface. His hand was on the phone before his conscious mind caught up. The NRO number. Response Team Delta, authenticate. This is Mason Patel, air traffic controller at Richmond International. Authentication code. He rattled off the number Dr. Rodriguez had given him. We have multiple phenomena over runway 27. 7 objects. Geometric formation. Copy your report. Assets are being repositioned. Stay on the line. Through the window, Mason watched the lights begin to move. Not the stuttering jumps of before. This was smooth, coordinated movement. The hexagon rotated slowly, each sphere maintaining perfect distance from its neighbors. Then the formation tilted, angling toward the airport terminal. They're moving toward the terminal building, Mason reported, trying to keep his voice steady. Speed approximately 10 knots. Altitude 300 feet and descending. Copy. Ground personnel are being notified to stay indoors. The spheres descended to 200 feet, 150 feet. They were close enough now that Mason could see details, or rather, the lack of details. The lights weren't attached to anything. They weren't reflections or projections. They were self-luminous objects hanging in space, each one a small sun casting pools of blue-white illumination on the tarmac below. At 100 feet altitude, the formation stopped, directly over the airport's main terminal, and then the lights pulsed. It wasn't a flash, it was a wave of luminosity that rippled through all 7 spheres simultaneously, bright enough that Mason had to look away. When he looked back, the lights had changed color, from blue-white to gold to red to a purple he'd never seen before, and didn't have words to describe. We're seeing chromatic variation, Mason reported. All 7 objects cycling through the spectrum. Copy. Satellite imagery confirms. We're also detecting electromagnetic anomalies. Is your equipment functioning normally? Mason glanced at his screens. The radar was showing static. The radio was crackling with interference. Even the digital clock on the wall was flickering. Negative. Multiple system disruptions. And then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, the lights shot upward, all 7 at once, moving in perfect synchronization. They climbed vertically at impossible speed. Mason didn't need instruments to know they'd just gone from stationary to hypersonic in under a second. In 3 heartbeats, they were gone, leaving nothing but the quiet night and the fading after images burned into Mason's retinas. Objects have departed, Mason said into the phone. Vertical ascent. Visual contact lost. Confirmed on satellite. They're tracking at Mach 12 and still accelerating. Altitude now 120,000 feet. They're leaving the atmosphere. Mason's legs felt weak. He sat down heavily in his chair. Leaving the atmosphere? Yes. And Mr. Patel, thank you. The data we just collected is invaluable. Someone will be in contact soon. The line went dead. Mason sat in the tower for a long time after that, staring out at runway 27. The airport had returned to normal. Systems were functioning again. The night was quiet. But something fundamental had changed, and Mason knew in his bones that nothing would ever be quite the same. Gerald returned from his break 20 minutes later, carrying a fresh coffee. Anything exciting happen while I was gone? Mason looked at the older man, at his weathered face and approaching retirement, and made a decision. No. Quiet night. Good. I like quiet nights. Mason filed his official report 3 hours later, at the end of his shift. Per Protocol Echo 7, it was brief and clinical. Unidentified aerial phenomena observed over airport property. Multiple objects. No safety impact. FAA notified. But the unofficial report, the one he sent to Dr. Rodriguez's secure email, was 12 pages long. Every detail, every observation, every moment of that geometric formation dancing in the sky over Richmond. Her response came 2 days later. A single line. The pattern is accelerating. We're running out of time. Mason never learned exactly what that meant. The lights appeared over Richmond 3 more times in the next week, always at night, always in formation, always departing vertically at speeds that violated physics. Then, on February 1st, they stopped, not just at Richmond, everywhere. Dr. Rodriguez called him on February 15th. It's over. What's over? The phenomena. They've stopped appearing. Every airport that was experiencing activity, nothing for 2 weeks. Whatever they wanted, they got it. What did they want? A long pause. We still don't know, but I can tell you this. Every major government on Earth is now aware these things exist. The data has been shared, quietly. Officially, nothing happened. But unofficially, the world changed, Mr. Patel. We know we're not alone. We know something is watching us, and we know we have absolutely no idea what to do about it. What happens now? Now we wait. And we watch the skies. Because whatever those lights were, wherever they came from, they'll be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this year, but they'll be back. She was right, of course, but that's a different story. Mason Patel continued working as an air traffic controller for another 3 years. He never saw the lights again, but he heard stories from other controllers. Whispers in crew lounges, careful conversations over encrypted channels. The phenomena kept appearing, kept watching, kept conducting their unknowable reconnaissance. In 2023, Mason retired from the FAA. He's living in North Carolina now, teaching aviation classes at a community college. Sometimes his students ask him about the strange things pilots have reported over the years. UFOs and unexplained lights and radar anomalies. And Mason always gives the same answer. I don't know what's out there, but I know something is, and I know we need to keep watching the skies. Because on November 14, 2019, a light appeared over runway 27 at Richmond International Airport, and nothing has been quite the same since. There are moments in your career when you see something that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world. For Elise Harrington, that moment came at 3:17 a.m. on March 22, 2021, when she saw something impossible reflecting off the nose of a Boeing 747 freighter parked on apron Delta 5. Elise had been working ground control at Memphis International Airport for 7 years. 7 years of directing aircraft around one of the busiest cargo hubs in the world. 7 years of watching FedEx and UPS jets taxi through the darkness, their navigation lights painting red and green streaks across the tarmac. 7 years, and she'd never seen anything like the metallic shimmer that appeared on that 747's nose at 3:17 in the morning. Ground, Apex Cargo 9114, ready for pushback, Delta 5. Elise's hand moved to the radio automatically, her eyes scanning the apron camera feeds that covered her workstation. 6 monitors, each split into multiple camera angles, giving her a god's eye view of the cargo ramp. Apron Delta 5 was in the upper right screen, a sprawling section of concrete where heavy freighters parked for loading. Apex 914, ground. Stand by for pushback clearance. She pulled up the taxi chart, verifying the pushback route. Standard procedure. Delta 5 pushed back onto taxiway Echo, then held for clearance to the cargo departure runway. Simple. Routine. Except nothing about the next few minutes was going to be routine. Elise glanced at the Delta 5 camera feed again, checking for ground vehicles or other traffic that might conflict with the pushback. That's when she saw it. A shimmer. A metallic gleam on the 747's nose, right below the cockpit windows. It looked like a reflection, the way chrome catches light, or how aluminum foil glints in the sun. Except it was 3:17 a.m. and there was no sun. The apron lights were positioned behind and to the sides of the aircraft, not in front. There was nothing that should be casting that kind of reflection. Elise leaned closer to the monitor, squinting. The shimmer moved slightly, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt, but the March air was 42 degrees. Her finger hovered over the zoom control, about to magnify the image, when she noticed something else. The zebra stripes. Ground markings. Those thick white lines painted on the concrete to guide aircraft and vehicles were clearly visible in the camera feed. But directly in front of the 747, maybe 30 feet from the nose gear, there was a patch of darkness. Not shadow, because shadows have edges and gradients. This was a zone where the zebra stripes simply weren't. Like someone had taken an eraser to the video feed and deleted a perfect circle of concrete about 15 feet in diameter. Ground, Apex 914, confirming ready for pushback. The pilot's voice snapped Elise back to her job. She shook her head slightly, trying to clear it. Long night shift, tired eyes. She'd review the camera feed later, probably discover it was just a glitch in the video system. Apex 914, you're cleared for pushback. Call when ready to taxi. Cleared, pushback, Apex 914. Through the camera feed, Elise watched the ground crew connect the pushback tug to the 747's nose gear. The tug driver gave the signal, and the massive aircraft began rolling backward, its nose cone, still displaying that inexplicable metallic shimmer, moving away from the loading bridge. That's when the shimmer intensified. What had been a faint gleam became a brilliant flash of light, bright enough that the camera's automatic gain control kicked in and darkened the entire image. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, that 747's nose blazed like a mirror catching a spotlight. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The aircraft continued its pushback. The tug disconnected. The pilot radioed ready for taxi. Everything proceeded normally. Except that dark patch on the zebra stripes was still there. Elise's hand was already reaching for the phone that connected to ramp operations when her supervisor, Marcus Reeves, appeared at her shoulder. "Did you see that?" Marcus's voice was tight. "The flash on Apex 914? "Yeah, what the hell was that?" "I don't know. Could have been a reflection from what, Elise? There's nothing out there that could cause that. I've been watching the feeds for 15 years. That wasn't normal." Elise brought up the playback controls on her monitor. "Let me rewind it. We can see exactly what..." The feed went black. Not static, not an error message, just black. The timestamp showed 03:14:28 to 03:17:52, the exact period when the shimmer had appeared and the dark patch had formed on the concrete. 3 minutes and 24 seconds of footage, simply gone. "What the..." Marcus leaned in, his finger stabbing at the playback controls. "That's not a glitch. The feed didn't drop. It was there a second ago." "I was watching it live," Elise said, her mouth suddenly dry. "I saw it happen in real time. The shimmer, the dark spot on the pavement, all of it. Then where's the recording?" They tried every camera angle covering Apron Delta 5. Every single feed showed the same thing. 3 minutes and 24 seconds of black screen during the exact time period when the phenomenon had occurred. Before that, normal footage. After that, normal footage. But during those critical minutes, nothing. "Check the other aprons," Marcus said. "See if they had the same dropout." Elise cycled through the other camera feeds, Delta 1 through Delta 4. Continuous footage, no interruptions. Delta 6 through Delta 10, same thing. Only Delta 5 had experienced the blackout, and only during those specific minutes. Marcus straightened up, his face pale. "I'm calling maintenance, and security, and..." He paused. And maybe we need to call someone else. Who? I don't know. Someone who deals with this kind of thing. Deals with what kind of thing, Marcus? We don't even know what this is. But they both knew, even if neither wanted to say it. In 7 years of ground control, Elise had seen plenty of unexplained occurrences. Lights in the sky, strange radar returns, pilots reporting things they couldn't identify. The standard procedure was always the same. File a report. Let the FAA handle it. Don't talk about it. Aviation was a small community, and the last thing anyone wanted was a reputation as that controller who sees things. But this was different. This wasn't a distant light in the sky. This was something on the apron, close enough to reflect off an aircraft's nose, close enough to affect camera systems, and close enough to leave a mark or the absence of a mark on the concrete. "I'm going out there," Elise said suddenly. "What? You can't leave your position." "Sarah's on break. She can cover for 10 minutes. I need to see that spot on the pavement." Marcus hesitated. Technically, she was right. They could shift coverage for a brief period, but going out to investigate a potential anomaly during the middle of a shift? That was irregular at best, reckless at worst. 5 minutes, he finally said. "In and out, take your radio. And Elise, be careful." She grabbed her high-visibility jacket and headed for the exit, her heart hammering harder than it should for a simple walk across the apron. The night air hit her like a slap, cold, sharp, carrying the smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid that was the permanent perfume of any cargo airport. Memphis International at 3:30 a.m. was a strange place. Dozens of aircraft parked in neat rows, their massive bodies dark and silent between flights. Ground crews swarmed around active aircraft, loading containers with practiced efficiency. The rumble of auxiliary power units provided a constant bass note to the symphony of warning beeps, radio chatter, and distant jet engines. Elise walked toward Apron Delta 5, staying well clear of the active taxiways. The 747 that had been parked there, Apex Cargo 914, was gone now, already taxiing toward the departure runway. But the spot where it had been parked was easy to find. The ground markings, those zebra stripes that guided aircraft and prevented collisions, were clearly visible in the harsh sodium vapor lights that bathed the apron, except for one spot. Elise stopped about 20 feet away, her breath visible in the cold air. The dark patch was still there, but now, standing in front of it instead of viewing it through a camera, she could see it wasn't darkness at all. It was an absence. The zebra stripes didn't fade or blur or get covered by shadow. They simply stopped existing in a perfectly circular area about 15 feet in diameter. The asphalt in that circle looked normal. No scorching, no discoloration, no chemical residue. But the paint that should have been there, paint that had been applied by the airport maintenance crew just 2 months ago, was gone. Not faded, not scraped away. Just gone. Elise crouched down at the edge of the circle, pulling a small flashlight from her jacket. She played the beam across the boundary between normal pavement and the affected area. The transition was razor sharp. 1 inch, you had white paint. The next inch, bare asphalt. No gradient, no transition zone. She reached out, fingers hovering just above the surface, then drew back. Every instinct screamed at her not to touch it. Instead, she stood up and keyed her radio. "Ground, this is Harrington. Marcus, you need to see this." "Copy. What have you got?" "The paint's gone. Not faded, not covered. Gone. Perfect circle, clean edges. It's like someone used a giant cookie cutter to remove every trace of paint from this spot." There was a long pause. "Don't touch anything. I'm sending Jonah out there." Jonah Alvarez was the night shift ramp lead, a 15-year veteran who'd worked cargo operations at 3 different airports. If anyone had seen weird things on the apron, it would be Jonah. Elise stayed where she was, keeping well back from the circle, watching aircraft move in the distance. 3 minutes later, Jonah's pickup truck pulled up, yellow warning lights flashing. He climbed out, a tall man with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent most of his life outdoors. He walked over to Elise, glanced at the circle, and stopped dead. "Well, that's new," he said quietly. "You've never seen anything like this?" "Never, and I've seen a lot of strange stuff out here. Bird strikes that left weird marks, lightning damage that melted asphalt, chemical spills that ate through paint, but this," he shook his head, "this is different." Jonah walked around the perimeter of the circle, examining it from different angles. Then he pulled out his own flashlight and got down on one knee, inspecting the boundary line with the intensity of a crime scene investigator. "The asphalt's undamaged," he said. "No heat scarring, no chemical etching. The paint's just not there anymore." He stood up, brushing concrete dust from his knee. "What happened before you noticed this?" Elise told him about the shimmer on the 747's nose, the bright flash, and the camera feeds going black for those 3 critical minutes. As she talked, Jonah's expression grew more serious. "And the shimmer, you said it was metallic? Like a reflection?" "Yes, but there was nothing there to cause it. The apron lights weren't positioned right, and there weren't any vehicles with headlights in that direction." Jonah was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the dark sky above the apron. 3 weeks ago, I had a weird experience out here. Different apron, but similar strangeness. What happened? I was doing a walk-around inspection on a DC-10 freighter. Big plane, parked on Delta 8. It was around 2 a.m., quiet night, and I noticed this, I don't know how to describe it. A distortion in the air, like heat shimmer, but it was February and freezing cold. The distortion was between me and the aircraft's tail section. "Did you report it?" "Tried to. Pulled out my phone to take a picture, but the camera wouldn't focus. Just kept hunting, like it couldn't decide what to lock onto. By the time I got the camera working, the distortion was gone. Whole thing lasted maybe 30 seconds. Did anything else happen? Yeah, when I finished the inspection and went to file my report, I noticed my watch had stopped. Digital watch, new battery, no reason for it to quit. But it had frozen at exactly the moment I saw that distortion. Took it to a repair shop the next day. Guy said the circuitry was fried, like it had been hit with an electromagnetic pulse. Elise felt cold that had nothing to do with the March temperature. "You think this is related?" "I think we've got something weird happening at this airport, and we're not the only ones who've noticed." Jonah pulled out his phone and snapped several photos of the circle. "I'm documenting this before it disappears, or before someone makes it disappear. You think someone would cover this up?" "I think airports don't like unexplained phenomena. Bad for business. Bad for public confidence. You know how many flights we handle here every night? Thousands. If word got out that mysterious things were happening on the apron, that aircraft might be getting exposed to whatever this is." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They stood there for another few minutes, 2 professionals who'd built careers on procedures and protocols, staring at something that violated every rule in their mental playbook. Finally, Jonah spoke again. "We need to report this properly. Full documentation, photos, measurements, statements from everyone who witnessed anything unusual tonight. And we need to do it before anyone can tell us not to." "The camera feeds are already gone," Elise said. 3 minutes of footage, just black, like someone erased it. Or like something interfered with the recording. Either way, we document what we can right now, while it's still here. Jonah spent the next 10 minutes taking photos from every angle, using his phone to record measurements of the circle, noting the exact location on his apron map. Elise stood watch, making sure no aircraft or ground vehicles got too close. The entire time, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed. Not by security cameras, those were expected. This was different. A pressure on the back of her neck, an awareness of presence that had no physical source. When Jonah finished, they walked back toward the operations building together. Neither spoke, but Elise could tell they were both thinking the same thing. What the hell had they just witnessed? The answer, when it came, would be far stranger than either of them imagined. Back in the tower, Marcus had been busy. He'd called maintenance, security, and the shift supervisor. By the time Elise returned to her station, there were 6 people crowded around her monitors, all trying to understand how 3 minutes of footage could simply vanish. "It's not a storage issue," the IT technician was saying, fingers flying across a keyboard. "The system's recording continuously, but these 3 minutes, it's like they never existed. There's no gap, no error log, nothing. The timestamp jumps from 03:14:28 directly to 03:17:52, and the system thinks that's normal." "Can you recover it?" Marcus asked. "There's nothing to recover. The data was never written to disk, or if it was, something deleted it so thoroughly that there's no trace. I've never seen anything like this." The shift supervisor, a stern woman named Patricia Hammond, crossed her arms. "And the paint circle outside?" "Still there," Jonah confirmed. "I've got photos and measurements. Whatever removed that paint did it precisely and completely. No chemical residue, no heat damage, nothing." Patricia's jaw tightened. "This is going to require a formal incident report, FAA notification, possibly an investigation. You all understand what that means?" They understood. It meant scrutiny. It meant questions. It meant the possibility of being labeled unreliable, or worse, imaginative. In aviation, imagination was not considered an asset. "I want statements from everyone who witnessed anything unusual tonight," Patricia continued. "Typed, signed, and on my desk by the end of shift. And until we understand what happened, I want Delta 5 marked as a restricted area. No aircraft park there until we've had that circle inspected by someone who knows what they're looking at." "Who would that be?" Elise asked. Patricia hesitated. "I'm going to make some calls. There are people who handle unusual situations. I'll let you know as the rest of the shift passed in a blur." Elise typed up her statement, choosing every word carefully. She stuck to observable facts, what she saw, when she saw it, what the camera feeds showed. She avoided speculation, avoided dramatic language, avoided any suggestion that she thought this was something extraordinary. Just the facts. But the facts were extraordinary enough. At 7 a.m., when the day shift arrived, Elise was exhausted. Not from the work, the rest of the night had been routine after the Delta 5 incident, but from the mental effort of processing what she'd experienced. As she gathered her belongings to leave, Marcus pulled her aside. "Don't talk about this," he said quietly. "Not to the day shift, not to your friends, not to anyone." Patricia was very clear. "Until we know what we're dealing with, this stays between the people who were here tonight." "What do you think it was?" Marcus glanced around, making sure no one was in earshot. "I think it was something that doesn't belong in our airspace, and I think someone knows more about it than they're telling us." Elise drove home through the morning rush hour, the Memphis skyline visible in her rearview mirror. She lived 20 minutes from the airport, in a quiet neighborhood where the biggest excitement was usually someone's dog getting loose. Ordinary life. Normal problems. A world away from mysterious shimmers and vanishing paint and missing camera footage. But as she pulled into her driveway and killed the engine, Elise made a decision. Whatever had happened on Apron Delta 5, she was going to find out what it was. even if that meant digging into things she wasn't supposed to know about. Even if it meant risking her career. Because somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought had taken root and refused to let go. If this could happen once, it could happen again. And next time, it might not just be paint that disappeared. She had no idea how right she was. Elise didn't sleep well that day. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that metallic shimmer on the 747's nose, that perfect circle where paint shouldn't have vanished but did. Around 2 p.m., she gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee, sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open. The internet was full of stories about mysterious happenings at airports. Pilots reporting strange lights, controllers describing radar anomalies, ground crews witnessing objects that moved in ways no aircraft should. Most of these accounts were on forums and conspiracy websites, easy to dismiss as hoaxes or misidentifications. But some were different. Some came from professional publications, buried in the back pages, written in careful language that avoided saying anything too controversial. Unexplained aerial phenomena. Anomalous radar returns. Equipment malfunctions of unknown origin. Reading between the lines, it was clear. Elise wasn't the first person to see something impossible at an airport. She probably wasn't even the 100th. Her phone rang around 3 p.m. Jonah Alvarez. "You awake?" His voice was rough, like he'd been sleeping as poorly as she had. "Unfortunately." "Good, because I found something. Can you meet me?" "Where?" "There's a coffee shop on Winchester Road, about halfway between your place and mine. The Grindhouse, know it?" "I can find it. 20 minutes? I'll be there." The Grindhouse was the kind of place that catered to late-shift workers. Cops, nurses, airport personnel. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, and the atmosphere was pure utilitarian. When Elise walked in, Jonah was already there, sitting in a back booth with a laptop in front of him and dark circles under his eyes. She slid into the booth across from him. "You look how I feel." "Can't stop thinking about it," Jonah said. "The circle, the shimmer, the missing footage. So I started digging. And?" He turned the laptop to face her. On the screen was a document, official-looking, with FAA letterhead at the top. The title read, "Incident Report. Anomalous Ground Phenomena, O'Hare International Airport, January 15th, 2021. Elise scanned the text. The report described an incident almost identical to what they'd experienced. Mysterious shimmer observed on an aircraft during pushback. Dark patch appearing on the apron concrete. Camera footage corrupted or missing. The report concluded with standard bureaucratic language. Phenomenon remains unexplained. No safety impact determined. Recommend continued monitoring." "Where did you get this?" Elise asked. "I've got a friend who works at O'Hare. Ground operations, like me. We talk sometimes, trade stories about the weird stuff we see. After last night, I called him, asked if anything strange had happened there recently. He sent me this. So, it's happened before. Yeah, and not just O'Hare." Jonah pulled up another document. LaGuardia, December 2020. San Francisco, November 20. Dallas-Fort Worth, October 2020. Always cargo aprons. Always night shifts. Always the same pattern. Shimmer. Dark spot. Missing footage. Elise felt her pulse quicken. "How many incidents are we talking about?" "At least 8 that I've found so far. And those are just the ones that got officially reported. My contact at O'Hare says he knows of 3 other times it happened there, but the reports never made it beyond the airport level." "Why not?" "Because airports don't want this kind of attention. Think about it. You're running a major cargo hub, moving billions of dollars in freight every night. The last thing you want is for shippers to start worrying that mysterious phenomena might be affecting their cargo, or worse, affecting the aircraft themselves. Elise leaned back, trying to process what she was hearing. So, what are we looking at here? Some kind of coordinated, what? Surveillance? Testing? I don't know, but look at the timeline. Jonah pulled up a map on his laptop, marked with red dots. It starts on the West Coast in October, moves eastward over the next few months. Denver, Dallas, Chicago, and now Memphis. If you draw a line through these incidents, it's tracking across the country. Like something's making its way from one major cargo hub to the next. Exactly. They sat in silence for a moment, the implications settling over them like fog. Finally, Elise spoke again. What do we do with this information? That's the question. We could go to Patricia, show her what I found, push for a real investigation. But we both know how that'll go. The airport will want to keep it quiet. The FAA will file it away, and we'll be told to forget about it. So, what's the alternative? Jonah closed the laptop. We keep digging. We find out who else has seen this. We collect evidence, and when we have enough to make a case that can't be ignored, we go public. That's career suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to get real answers. Elise stared into her coffee, watching steam curl up from the surface. She'd spent 7 years building a career in air traffic control. 7 years of playing by the rules, following procedures, keeping her head down. Going rogue now, pursuing an unsanctioned investigation into phenomena that officially didn't exist. That was a gamble with odds she couldn't calculate. But the alternative was living with the knowledge that something impossible was happening. Something that might pose a risk to aircraft and crews, and doing nothing about it. I'm in, she heard herself say. What's the first step? First step is talking to more people. Ground crews, controllers, maintenance techs, anyone who works nights at cargo airports. See how many of them have seen something similar. Build a database of incidents. And the second step? We figure out what these things want. Over the next 2 weeks, Elise and Jonah became amateur investigators. They reached out to contacts at airports across the country, asking carefully worded questions about unusual incidents during night shifts. The responses were revealing. At least 20 people reported experiences similar to theirs. Shimmers, distortions, dark patches appearing on concrete or asphalt. Many mentioned camera malfunctions or missing footage. Several described a feeling of being watched, that same pressure on the back of the neck that Elise had felt on Apron Delta 5. But none of them had gone public. None had pushed for investigation. They'd all done what good employees do. Filed reports, followed up when asked, then moved on when told it wasn't a priority. It's a pattern of silence, Jonah said during one of their meetings at the grindhouse. These incidents happen, they get noticed, they get reported, and then they get buried. Someone's making sure these stories don't connect. Who? Could be the airports themselves, trying to avoid bad publicity. Could be the FAA, not wanting to admit they don't know what's happening in controlled airspace. Or, he paused, or it could be someone else entirely. You're talking about government agencies, military intelligence, that kind of thing. I'm saying that if unknown objects are appearing at major cargo airports, someone in the government probably knows about it. And if they're not sharing that information with us, there's a reason. On April 5th, 2 weeks after the Delta 5 incident, Elise was back on night shift. She'd requested the assignment despite protests from her family about the toll the overnight hours took on her. But she needed to be there. If another incident occurred, she wanted to witness it firsthand. The shift started normally enough. Aircraft pushed back, taxied, departed, arrived. the rhythm of cargo operations, familiar and predictable. Jonah was on duty too, supervising the ramp crews, keeping an eye on the aprons. At 2:47 a.m., Elise's radio crackled with Jonah's voice. "Ground, ramp lead. We've got a situation on Delta 7. Elise's stomach tightened. "Go ahead, ramp lead." "I'm looking at, I don't know how to describe this. There's a distortion near a parked 767. Shimmer in the air like heat waves, getting stronger." "Copy, ramp lead. Can you get closer?" "Negative. My crew's pulling back. This looks just like..." The radio cut out. Not static, just dead air. Elise immediately switched to the backup frequency. Nothing. She checked her monitors. The camera feed for apron Delta 7 was still active, showing the 767 clearly, ground vehicles moving around it, but no shimmer visible on the screen. "Ramp lead, do you copy?" Nothing. She tried Jonah's cell phone, straight to voicemail. Marcus appeared at her shoulder again, just like 2 weeks ago. "What's happening?" Jonah reported a distortion on Delta 7, same as the last incident. Then communications dropped. Marcus grabbed a radio, tried other frequencies. No response from anyone on the ramp. The operations floor was suddenly tense, controllers and supervisors clustering around Elise's station. Patricia Hammond's voice cut through the confusion. "Is this happening again?" "Appears so," Marcus said. "Get emergency services rolling. Crash phone now." As personnel scrambled to respond, Elise kept her eyes locked on the Delta 7 camera feed. Whatever Jonah was seeing out there, it wasn't showing up on video, just like last time. The cameras were recording normally, but missing the phenomenon entirely. Then she saw something that made her heart skip. On the camera feed, ground personnel were running. Not a controlled evacuation, but a panicked sprint away from the 767. She could see them pointing at something, gesturing frantically, but the camera showed nothing where they were pointing. "Marcus, look at this." He leaned in, watching the screen. "They're running from something we can't see." The radio crackled back to life. Jonah's voice strained. "Ground, ramp lead, we're clear of the area. All personnel evacuated from Delta 7. Ramp lead, what's your status?" "We're okay, but that thing is growing. It's bigger than last time, a lot bigger." "Describe what you're seeing." "It's a sphere, or something sphere-like, maybe 30 feet in diameter, hovering about 10 feet off the ground. It's not solid, it's like looking at something through warped glass. And there's a sound now. Low-frequency hum, feel it in your chest more than hear it." Elise's fingers flew across her keyboard, trying to get different camera angles. Every feed showed the same thing: ground personnel at a safe distance, equipment abandoned, the 767 parked peacefully with no visible disturbance near it. "Ramp lead, our cameras aren't picking anything up. Can you take photos?" "Trying. Phone's acting weird. Camera won't focus on it." Just like before, Elise thought. Just like what happened to Jonah 3 weeks ago. Whatever these things were, they interfered with recording devices. For 3 minutes, they watched on the monitors as ground crews stayed at a safe distance from something invisible. 3 minutes of radio chatter, status updates, emergency protocols being activated. 3 minutes of controlled chaos. Then Jonah's voice. "It's ascending, moving straight up, fast. Can you still see it?" "Barely. It's getting smaller. And it's gone. Whatever it was, it's gone." The tension in the operations room released slightly. Patricia immediately began issuing orders. Statements from all witnesses, physical inspection of Delta 7, documentation of any anomalies. Elise knew what they'd find. Another dark patch where paint had vanished. Another few minutes of missing camera footage. Another incident that would be filed, investigated superficially, and ultimately buried. But this time was different. This time, Jonah had mobilized his entire ramp crew to document what they'd seen. 23 trained professionals, all reporting the same phenomenon. That was harder to dismiss than one or two isolated witnesses. When Elise's shift ended at 7 a.m., she found Jonah waiting in the parking lot leaning against his pickup truck. He looked exhausted but energized, the way people look after surviving something intense. "You saw it," she said. It wasn't a question. Clear as day. "That thing was real, Elise. Whatever it is, wherever it comes from, it's real. And it's getting bolder. 23 witnesses this time. Yeah, that's going to be harder to sweep under the rug. You think they'll try?" Jonah smiled grimly. "I think we're about to find out." 2 days later, they got their answer. The FAA investigator arrived at Memphis International on April 7th, 48 hours after the Delta 7 incident. His name was Robert Sinclair, a quiet man in his 50s with the kind of face that revealed nothing and eyes that missed nothing. He interviewed everyone who'd been on duty that night: controllers, ground crew, maintenance personnel, security officers. Elise's interview took 90 minutes. Sinclair asked detailed questions about what she'd seen on the monitors, what she'd heard on the radio, what she'd observed in the days leading up to the incident. His manner was professional but not unfriendly, taking notes in a small leather-bound notebook rather than on any electronic device. When he was done with his questions, he closed the notebook and looked at her directly. "Ms. Harrington, you've been working ground control for 7 years. In that time, have you ever witnessed anything similar to the events of March 22nd and April 5th? "No, sir." "And have you discussed these incidents with anyone outside official channels?" The question was casual, but Elise heard the weight behind it. "Only with colleagues who were present during the incidents." "I see." Sinclair stood up. "Thank you for your time. If you remember any additional details, here's my card." The card was simple white cardstock with a name and phone number. No agency designation, no email address, just a number. After Sinclair left, Elise found Jonah in the break room. "He interviewed you yet?" "First thing this morning. Asked about Delta 7, asked about the incident 3 weeks earlier, asked if I'd been discussing it with anyone." Jonah lowered his voice. "He also asked about my contacts at other airports. Specifically asked if I'd been reaching out to ground crews at O'Hare, LaGuardia, and Dallas." Elise felt cold. How would he know that? Either he's very thorough, or someone's been monitoring our communications. That's paranoid. Is it? We've got incidents happening at some airports across the country. Missing footage. Witnesses being told to keep quiet. And now, an FAA investigator who seems to know more about our private activities than he should. You tell me if paranoid is the right word. Before Elise could respond, Patricia Hammond appeared in the doorway. "Harrington, Alvarez, my office, now." They followed her to the airport administration building, up to the 2nd floor, where the senior staff had offices. Patricia's was modest: desk, filing cabinets, window overlooking the cargo ramp. She gestured for them to sit and close the door. "I'm going to be direct with you both," Patricia began. "The FAA investigator has concluded his preliminary review. His findings are inconclusive. The physical evidence, the missing paint, the camera malfunctions, supports your statements that something unusual occurred. However, the nature of that unusual occurrence remains undetermined." "Undetermined," Jonah repeated. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the FAA cannot identify what caused these phenomena. They're classifying both incidents as unexplained anomalies and recommending continued monitoring." "That's it?" Elise felt anger rising in her chest. 23 people saw something impossible on that apron, and the official response is continued monitoring? Patricia's expression was sympathetic but firm. That's the official response. And there's something else. Mr. Sinclair has recommended that all personnel involved in these incidents exercise discretion when discussing them. No social media posts, no sharing of photos or videos, no contact with media organizations. That sounds like a gag order, Jonah said. It's a strongly worded suggestion, for the good of the airport and for the aviation industry as a whole. These kinds of stories, if they get sensationalized. Patricia trailed off. You both understand how public perception works. One viral video, one dramatic news story, and suddenly passengers are afraid to fly. Shippers are worried about their cargo. Insurance companies are asking questions. The economic impact could be significant. So we just pretend it didn't happen? You file your reports, answer questions if asked, and otherwise focus on your jobs. That's what professionals do. The meeting ended shortly after. As they walked back to the terminal, Jonah's jaw was tight with frustration. They're burying it, just like every other incident. What did you expect? Elise asked. That the FAA would hold a press conference announcing that mysterious phenomena are appearing at cargo airports? That would be career suicide for everyone involved. So we do nothing. I didn't say that. They stopped near the security checkpoint, lowering their voices as other personnel passed by. Elise pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app, typing quickly. Tonight, I'm going to do something that's probably stupid and definitely against protocol. I'm going to review every minute of security footage we have from the past 3 months. Not just the official camera feeds, all of them. Perimeter cameras, maintenance areas, vehicle tracking. If these phenomena have appeared more than twice, there might be other recordings. They'll know you accessed those files. Only if they're checking access logs, and only if they care. Elise looked at him. Are you in or out? Jonah was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'm in, but if we're doing this, we need to be smart about it. We document everything off-site, backup copies stored somewhere they can't be deleted. Agreed, and we need to be ready for the possibility that this gets us fired. Then I guess we'd better find something worth getting fired for. That night, after her official shift ended, Elise stayed late. She told the incoming supervisor she was catching up on paperwork, which was believable enough. The operations floor at night was never fully empty, but it was quiet, just enough staff to handle the reduced traffic of the early morning hours. She pulled up the security footage archive, a massive database of video from every camera on airport property. The official incident report cited missing footage from specific cameras during specific time periods. But what about cameras that hadn't been checked? What about angles that seemed irrelevant at the time? Elise started with March 22nd, the night of the first Delta V incident. She pulled up footage from perimeter cameras that had sight lines toward the cargo apron. Most showed nothing unusual. Aircraft taxiing, ground vehicles moving, the normal business of a cargo hub at night. Then she found something. Camera PTZ-17, positioned on the northern perimeter fence with a view across the cargo ramp. At 03:14:32, just seconds before the Delta V incident, the camera caught something in the upper frame. A light. Not a navigation light from an aircraft, not a ground vehicle, not a reflection. A spherical light, moving slowly across the sky above the airport. Elise's heart rate kicked up. She zoomed in on the frame, enhancing the image as much as the system would allow. The light was distinct. A perfect sphere, glowing with that same metallic quality she'd seen reflecting off the 747's nose. She tracked it frame by frame. The light moved steadily across the sky, then stopped directly over apron Delta V. It hovered there for several seconds, and then the camera feed went black for exactly 3 minutes and 24 seconds. The same duration as the official camera feeds. When the picture returned, the light was gone. Elise exported the footage to a USB drive, her hands trembling slightly. This was evidence. Proof that something had been in the airspace above the airport during the incident. Proof that it wasn't just a ground-based phenomenon, but something aerial. Something that appeared to have intelligence and purpose. She continued searching through the archives. Camera PTZ-23, April 5th. Same pattern. Spherical light appearing in the sky, moving toward the airport, positioning itself over apron Delta 7 just before the incident Jonah had witnessed. But there was more. Going back further through the archives, Elise found 3 other occasions when similar lights had appeared over Memphis International. February 17th, January 9th, December 22nd of the previous year. Each time, a spherical light had moved across the sky and positioned itself over a cargo apron. Each time, camera feeds had gone dark for several minutes. 5 incidents, not 2. And those were just the ones caught on perimeter cameras that nobody had thought to check. Elise was so focused on the footage that she didn't hear footsteps approaching until a voice spoke behind her. "Working late, Ms. Harrington." She spun around. Robert Sinclair, the FAA investigator, stood in the doorway of the operations room. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were focused on the monitor where the frozen frame of a spherical light hung suspended. "I was reviewing footage, looking for patterns. I can see that." Sinclair walked closer, studying the screen. PTZ-17, interesting choice. Most people wouldn't think to check the perimeter cameras. Elise's mouth was dry. I was being thorough. Thorough, yes. Sinclair pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. "Ms. Harrington, I'm going to tell you something that isn't in my official report. May I speak candidly?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "You're not the first person to find footage like this, and you won't be the last. These phenomena, whatever they are, have been occurring at airports worldwide for at least 3 years. We have hundreds of reports, thousands of hours of footage, testimony from pilots and controllers and ground crews across 6 continents. And officially, we have no idea what they are. Officially, they remain unexplained anomalies. Unofficially," he gestured at the screen. "Unofficially, we know they're real. We know they're not drones or weather balloons or experimental aircraft. We know they exhibit intelligent behavior, and we know they're particularly interested in cargo operations at major airports. Why cargo? That's one of the questions we haven't answered. Why cargo specifically? Why night shifts? Why do they appear, observe, and leave without causing damage or injury? What are they looking for?" Elise stared at the frozen image of the light. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're asking the right questions. Because you're not content to file a report and forget about it. And because..." Sinclair paused. "Because the FAA needs people like you. People who notice things, who dig deeper, who won't accept easy answers. I thought you were here to tell me to keep quiet. I am here to tell you to be discreet. There's a difference. Keeping quiet means burying the truth. Being discreet means protecting it until we understand what we're dealing with." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, different from the one he'd given her earlier. This one had an email address and a phone number with a Washington, D.C. area code. "If you find more footage like this, I want you to send it to me directly, not through official channels, not through your supervisor, directly to me. Can you do that? Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, not completely. But right now, I'm the only person in the FAA who's going to take your findings seriously instead of trying to bury them. So the question isn't whether you trust me. It's whether you want answers badly enough to take a risk." Elise took the card. "I want answers. Good. Then keep digging, keep documenting, and keep this between us. Sinclair stood up. One more thing, the phenomena you're tracking, they're accelerating. 3 years ago, we'd see maybe one incident per month worldwide. Last year, it was one per week. This year, we're averaging one per day. Whatever these things are, they're becoming more active. We need to understand them before... He trailed off. Before what? Before they decide to do more than observe. Sinclair left, and Elise sat alone in the operations room, staring at the frozen image on her screen. A perfect sphere of light, hanging in the sky over her airport. Watching. Waiting. Planning something. She pulled out her phone and texted Jonah. "We need to talk. Found something. Meet at the usual place tomorrow afternoon." His response came quickly. "How bad?" "Worse than we thought. Much worse." Over the next 3 weeks, Elise and Jonah became part of something they didn't fully understand. Sinclair connected them with other controllers and ground personnel across the country, a loose network of aviation professionals who'd witnessed similar phenomena and were quietly collecting evidence. They learned that the spherical lights had been documented at over 80 airports worldwide. They learned that military installations had experienced similar incidents. They learned that commercial pilots had been reporting these objects for years, only to have their reports dismissed or explained away as weather balloons, satellites, or optical illusions. But most importantly, they learned they weren't alone. Dozens of people, maybe hundreds, were seeing the same things and asking the same questions. And slowly, quietly, they were building a case. On April 28th, Memphis International experienced its 6th incident. This time, Elise was ready. She had backup cameras positioned to capture multiple angles. She had equipment to measure electromagnetic fields. She had protocols in place to document everything. The spherical light appeared at 2:34 a.m., hovering over Apron Delta 2. It remained visible for 7 minutes, longer than any previous incident. And during those 7 minutes, every camera Elise had positioned captured clear, unambiguous footage of something that shouldn't exist. The sphere was translucent, its surface rippling like water. Inside, there were structures, geometric patterns that pulsed with light. It rotated slowly, seeming to scan the apron below with invisible sensors. Then, just before it departed, it pulsed with a brilliant flash of light, and the dark circle appeared again. But this time, it wasn't just paint that vanished. It was a 2-by-4-foot section of concrete. Not broken, not cracked, just gone. A perfectly rectangular hole, 18 inches deep, with edges so clean they looked machine-cut. The implications were staggering. Whatever these objects were, they could manipulate matter at a fundamental level. They could erase paint, delete camera footage, and now, apparently, remove concrete as easily as wiping a whiteboard clean. Sinclair arrived the next morning, earlier than usual. He examined the hole, took measurements, collected samples from the edges. When he was done, he pulled Elise aside. "This changes things. This is physical evidence we can't explain away. I'm escalating this to Washington. Full investigation, multiple agencies, the works. What happens to us? You did your job. You documented an anomaly. You're not in trouble." He paused. "But Ms. Harrington, you need to prepare yourself. Once this goes to the next level, the questions are going to get more intense. The scrutiny is going to increase. And the people asking those questions may not be as understanding as I am." "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are agencies that don't like loose ends, that don't like unsolved mysteries, that prefer tidy explanations and controlled narratives. If they decide you know too much, or you're too curious, they might take steps to manage your involvement." That sounds like a threat. It's a warning. Be smart, be careful, and don't trust everyone who claims to be on your side. Elise thought about that conversation a lot over the following weeks. The investigation expanded, just as Sinclair had predicted. More people came to the airport, asking questions, examining evidence, reviewing footage. Some were FAA, some were from agencies Elise didn't recognize. And gradually she began to notice something odd. The people asking questions weren't really looking for answers. They were looking for ways to explain away what had happened. They wanted weather phenomena, equipment malfunctions, hoaxes, anything except the conclusion that something genuinely anomalous was occurring. It was frustrating and frightening in equal measure. Here was clear evidence of something extraordinary, and the official response was to minimize it, compartmentalize it, file it away. But Elise had the footage. She had measurements. She had testimony from dozens of witnesses, and she had connections to people across the country who were experiencing the same thing. On May 15th, she made a decision. She contacted a journalist, someone who'd written about aviation anomalies before, someone with a reputation for careful, evidence-based reporting. She sent him everything: the footage, the measurements, the testimony, all of it. "This is going to cause problems," Jonah said when she told him what she'd done. "I know. You could lose your job. I know that too. So why do it?" Elise looked out at the cargo ramp, at the aircraft and vehicles moving through the night, at the sky above where spherical lights had danced and disappeared. Because if we don't, nobody will. And if nobody does, we'll never know what's really happening. I'd rather lose my job asking questions than keep it by staying silent. The story broke 3 weeks later. A carefully researched article in a major aviation publication, documenting the phenomena at Memphis and a dozen other airports. It included footage, testimony, expert analysis. It didn't claim to have all the answers, but it asked all the right questions. The response was immediate and intense. Some people dismissed it as conspiracy theory nonsense. Others demanded investigations. The FAA issued a statement acknowledging unexplained anomalies while emphasizing that no safety issues had been identified. And Elise received a formal notice that she was being placed on administrative leave pending review of her handling of sensitive information. She'd expected it, but expecting something didn't make it easier when it happened. Jonah was more fortunate. His role had been more peripheral, and the airport couldn't afford to lose experienced ramp personnel. But he called her the day her suspension was announced. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is my fault too. I should have—" "Don't," Elise interrupted. "We made this choice together, and I don't regret it. What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. Wait for the review, I guess. See if I still have a career when this is over." "And if you don't?" Elise smiled, though he couldn't see it over the phone. "Then I guess I'll find another way to get answers." She never did return to Memphis International as an air traffic controller. The review concluded that she'd violated protocols by sharing sensitive information with unauthorized parties, and her employment was terminated. But strange things have a way of leading to unexpected places. 6 months after her termination, Elise received a call from Robert Sinclair. The FAA was forming a special task force to investigate anomalous aerial phenomena at airports. They needed someone with the ground control experience, someone who'd witnessed the phenomena firsthand, someone who wasn't afraid to ask difficult questions. "The pay's not great," Sinclair told her. "And the work is mostly desk job, reviewing reports, analyzing data, coordinating with field personnel. But you'd be working on the cases that matter, the ones everyone else wants to ignore." "I'm in," Elise said without hesitation. And that's how a ground controller from Memphis became an investigator for the FAA's Anomalous Phenomena Research Division, a unit that officially doesn't exist, working on cases that officially never happened. The spherical lights still appear sometimes at airports around the world. They still leave dark circles where paint vanishes. They still cause cameras to malfunction and footage to disappear. And now, increasingly, they leave behind holes in concrete, perfect voids where matter simply ceases to exist. Nobody knows what they are. Nobody knows what they want. But people like Elise Harrington are working to find out. Because on March 22, 2021, at Apron Delta 5 of Memphis International Airport, something impossible happened, and Elise Harrington refused to pretend it didn't. Some questions are worth losing your career to answer. Some truths are worth risking everything to uncover, and some mysteries are too important to ignore, no matter how much easier it would be to look away. The investigation continues. Some nights change everything. For Riley Kincaid, that night was September 17, 2022, when 20 seconds of silence shattered the illusion that we understand everything happening in our airspace. Riley had been an air traffic control supervisor at Philadelphia International Airport for 9 years. 9 years of managing the controlled chaos of Class B airspace, the busiest, most complex airspace in aviation, where commercial jets, private aircraft, and helicopters all converged in a carefully orchestrated dance of approach paths and departure corridors. 9 years, and he thought he'd seen every possible scenario. He was wrong. The evening shift had been typical for a Saturday in September. Clear skies, light winds, steady traffic flow. Philadelphia's Class B airspace extended from the surface to 10,000 feet in a tiered structure, like an upside-down wedding cake, designed to funnel aircraft safely into and out of one of the East Coast's major hubs. Riley's team was handling 23 aircraft simultaneously, arrivals from the north, south, and west, departures climbing out to their cruise altitudes, a few VFR flights threading through the gaps. At 9:47 p.m., Riley was standing behind his approach controller, Maya Torres, watching her work 3 arrivals on a tight sequence. Aircraft were spaced at 5-mile intervals, descending through 8,000 feet on the extended centerline for runway 27R. Standard procedure. Textbook execution. Then the radar screens went blank. Not flickering. Not static. Just empty green screens where 23 aircraft should have been painting returns. The time displayed in the corner, 21:47:33, but no targets, no data blocks, no weather, nothing. What the hell? Maya's hands flew across her keyboard, trying to restore the display. Nothing responded. Riley's training kicked in immediately. Backup system, now! Torres switched to the backup radar. Same thing. Empty screens. Primary and backup are both down, she said, her voice controlled but tight. I've got 3 aircraft on final approach, and I can't see any of them. Riley grabbed the phone to the Technical Operations Center. Tech Ops Tower. We have complete radar failure, primary and backup. Need immediate. Tower, Southwest 1849. The pilot's voice cut through on the radio frequency, urgent but professional. We just had something pass directly over us, high rate of speed, maybe 1,000 feet above. Looked like a bright flash or metallic reflection. Before Riley could respond, another voice. Tower, United 737. Confirming visual on unknown object. Passed overhead, west to east, extremely fast. Looked like a bright streak of light. And then a third, Tower, Delta 2156. We also observed that flash. Whatever it was moving way faster than any aircraft I've ever seen. Riley's stomach dropped. 3 aircraft, all reporting the same phenomenon. At the exact moment the radar had failed. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a technical glitch. All aircraft on final, Tower. Continue your approach visually. We're experiencing temporary radar outage. Maintain separation and report any traffic conflicts. The seconds ticked by. Riley counted silently. 10 seconds, 15. Maya stared at her blank screens, hands poised over controls that were useless without radar data. The other controllers were frozen, watching their own dead displays. 20 seconds. Then, as suddenly as they'd disappeared, the radar returns bloomed back onto the screens. All 23 aircraft appeared exactly where they should be. Proper spacing, proper altitudes, proper headings, as if nothing had happened. "Radar contact restored," Maya announced, her voice shakier now. All aircraft showing normal. But nothing was normal. Riley could see it in the faces of his controllers, hear it in the radio transmissions from pilots still processing what they'd seen. Something had passed through Philadelphia's Class B airspace. Something that had either disabled the radar systems or somehow made itself invisible to them. Something that 3 separate flight crews had witnessed moving at impossible speeds. Southwest 1849 Tower. Can you provide more detail on what you observed? Tower. It was a metallic flash, very bright. Appeared from the north, traveled south to north. Correction, north to south at our altitude plus maybe 1,000 feet. Duration of maybe 2 seconds, then gone. We've never seen anything move that fast. Riley made notes on his incident pad. Time, 21:47:33. Duration, approximately 20 seconds. 3 aircraft reported visual contact with unknown object. Complete radar failure on primary and backup systems during the event. As the shift continued, he collected statements from the pilots via radio. All 3 crews described essentially the same thing: a bright, metallic flash moving at extraordinary speed, passing overhead during final approach. None of them could identify it as any known aircraft type. At 10:15 p.m., Riley's phone rang. The airport operations manager, Nora Bennett. "Riley, what the hell happened with your radar?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. We had a 20-second dropout, primary and backup simultaneously. During the outage, 3 aircraft reported visual contact with an unknown fast-moving object." There was a pause. Unknown object? That's what the pilots are saying. Metallic flash, very high speed, passed overhead during approach. Jesus Christ. Okay, I need you to file a full incident report. And Riley, this needs to stay quiet until we know what we're dealing with. Last thing we need is panic or media speculation. Understood. After the call, Riley reviewed the radar recordings. He pulled up the playback for 2147 WAC to 2148 NA. The timeline showed normal operations until 2147:33, then nothing. A gap. For exactly 20 seconds, the system had recorded no data. At 21:47:53, recording resumed as if nothing had happened. He checked the system logs. No errors, no warnings, no indication that anything had malfunctioned. The system simply stopped recording data for 20 seconds, then started again. Maya came over during her break. "I've been doing this for 6 years. I've seen radar glitches, system failures, all kinds of technical issues. I've never seen both primary and backup fail simultaneously with no error messages. That's not how these systems work." "I know." And the pilots, they all saw the same thing. That's not mass hallucination. That's not instrument error. They saw something real. Riley looked at her carefully. "What do you think it was?" "I think it was something that didn't want to be seen on radar. Something that could either jam our systems or avoid detection completely. And I think whoever's responsible for investigating this is going to try very hard to find a conventional explanation." She was right, of course. By midnight, Riley had filed his incident report, documenting everything. The radar failure, the pilot reports, the timing, the duration. He attached transcripts of the radio communications and notes from his conversation with each pilot. The response came faster than expected. At 12:47 a.m., an email from the FAA Technical Operations Division. Preliminary analysis indicates temporary electromagnetic interference caused brief radar disruption. No safety impact determined. Aircraft maintained proper separation throughout event. Recommend monitoring for recurrence. Electromagnetic interference. That was the official explanation. Riley stared at the email, reading it 3 times. It was plausible, technically. EMI could affect radar systems. But it didn't explain why 3 pilots had visually observed a fast-moving object at the exact moment the radar failed. It didn't explain the metallic flash or the extraordinary speed. He forwarded the email to Maya with a single word. "Really?" Her response came back immediately. "Not buying it." Riley wasn't buying it either, but he also understood how these things worked. He'd been in aviation long enough to know that unusual incidents got sanitized, smoothed over, explained away. The official narrative would be technical malfunction. The pilot reports would be filed and forgotten. And anyone who pushed too hard for alternative explanations would be labeled a troublemaker. But Riley Kincaid had a problem. He couldn't let things go. At 7 a.m., when his shift ended, Riley found Nora Bennett in the Airport Operations Center. She was reviewing security camera footage on multiple monitors, her expression frustrated. "Tell me you found something," Riley said. "That's the problem. I found nothing. Look at this." She pulled up footage from one of the airside security cameras, timestamp 21:47:30. The camera had a wide view of the approach path, showing the runway and several thousand feet of airspace beyond. Riley watched the playback. Aircraft on approach, landing lights visible. The time ticked forward. 21:47:31, 21:47:32, 21:47:33. The screen went black. For exactly 20 seconds, the camera recorded nothing. Not static, not a frozen frame, just black. At 21:47:53, the image returned, showing the same aircraft now closer to the runway, as if the missing 20 seconds had never existed. "Every camera with a view of the approach path shows the same thing," Nora said quietly. 20-second dropout. No frames captured during that window. But the cameras before and after that window? Working perfectly. That's impossible. The radar and the cameras failed simultaneously. Not just failed. The data simply doesn't exist. There's no corrupted footage, no error logs, no indication of malfunction. Those 20 seconds were erased, or they were never recorded in the first place. Riley sat down heavily. 3 independent systems, primary radar, backup radar, and security cameras, all stopped recording at the exact same moment, and started again at the exact same moment. What about aircraft cameras? Some planes have external cameras for monitoring gear and wings. Already checked with the airlines. Southwest 1849 has a belly camera. Guess what? 20-second gap. Exactly. Whatever that thing was, it somehow interfered with every recording device in the area. They sat in silence for a moment, the implications settling over them like fog. Finally, Riley spoke. "We need to talk to the pilots, face to face, not over the radio. I want to know exactly what they saw." The airlines won't like that. Pilots are supposed to file reports through official channels. Then we do it unofficially. We find a way to contact them, maybe through the pilots' union or personal connections. Because right now, the official story is electromagnetic interference. But you and I both know that doesn't explain what happened. Nora turned to look at him. "Riley, be careful. If you start pushing too hard on this, asking too many questions, you're going to draw attention, not the good kind. Someone needs to ask questions. And someone needs to keep their job so they can actually find answers. Don't go rogue on this, work within the system, but be smart about it." Riley nodded. but he was already planning his next moves. He had pilot contacts, people he'd worked with for years, people who trusted him. If he could get detailed statements from the crew members who'd witnessed the object, statements that went beyond the sanitized official reports, maybe he could build a clearer picture of what had actually happened. Over the next 3 days, Riley made quiet inquiries. He reached out to a friend at the pilots' union, explaining that he was trying to understand an unusual incident for training purposes. Could the union facilitate contact with the crews from Southwest 1849, United 737, and Delta 2156? The response was cautious but helpful. The union representative would pass along Riley's contact information. If the pilots wanted to talk, they'd reach out. No promises. On September 21st, Riley's phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Captain Sarah Mendoza, Southwest 1849. I understand you want to talk about what happened Saturday night." Riley's pulse quickened. "Yes, Captain, thank you for calling. I'm trying to get a complete picture of the incident. The official report says electromagnetic interference, but that doesn't explain what you and the other crews observed." "No, it doesn't." Mendoza's voice was careful. "Look, I've been flying for 20 years. I've seen meteors, satellites, weather phenomena, military aircraft, all kinds of things in the sky. What passed over us Saturday night was none of those things." "Can you describe it in detail?" "It was a metallic object, highly reflective, moving north to south at an altitude maybe 1,000 feet above us. We were at 8,000 feet on final approach. The object was elongated, maybe cigar-shaped, though it was hard to tell because it was moving so fast. The light it reflected, or emitted, I couldn't tell which, was intense. Bright white with a blue tinge. Duration of visual contact was maybe 2 seconds, 3 at most. Then it was gone. Speed estimate? Conservative estimate. Mach 3 or higher, maybe much higher. I've seen military jets on afterburner. This was faster, way faster." "Did your instruments show anything unusual?" "That's the weird part. Our radar showed nothing. TCAS showed nothing. It was like the object didn't exist to our electronic systems. But all 3 of us in the cockpit saw it clear as day. My first officer said it looked like someone threw a spear made of light across the sky." Riley took notes furiously. "Captain, have you reported this level of detail in your official statement?" A long pause. "I filed a report saying we observed an unidentified fast-moving object. I kept the description general. My airline safety department called me the next day, asked if I was sure about what I saw. The tone was, let's say it was strongly suggested that unusual sightings are bad for a pilot's career prospects. They told you to downplay it. They didn't use those words, but the message was clear. File the report, check the box, move on. Don't make a big deal out of it." "What about the other crew members? Your first officer and the observer in the jump seat?" "They both saw it. They both felt the same pressure to keep it simple. Look, Mr. Kincaid, I'm talking to you because pilots talk, and word gets around that you're one of the good ones. Someone who actually cares about aviation safety. But I need you to understand, if this conversation becomes public, it could affect my career. So whatever you're doing with this information, please be discreet." "I will, and Captain, thank you for being honest." After the call, Riley sat in his home office, staring at his notes. A cigar-shaped metallic object, moving at Mach 3 or higher. Invisible to radar and TCAS, visible to the naked eye for 2 to 3 seconds. Appearing at the exact moment all recording systems failed for 20 seconds. He called Nora Bennett. "We need to meet. I just talked to one of the pilots." They met at a diner near the airport, late afternoon when the place was mostly empty. Riley recounted his conversation with Captain Mendoza while Nora listened, her coffee growing cold. Cigar-shaped and metallic, she said when he finished. That matches descriptions from other incidents. Other incidents? Nora pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. After Saturday night, I started doing research, looking for similar events at other airports. I found 17 documented cases in the past 3 years where radar systems experienced brief failures coinciding with pilot reports of fast-moving unidentified objects. 17. At least. These are just the ones that made it into official reports. My guess is there are more that got buried or explained away, but the pattern is consistent. Brief radar outage. Pilots report visual contact with fast-moving object. Recording systems malfunction, and then everything returns to normal. Riley leaned back in the booth. Someone knows about this. Someone's tracking these incidents and making sure they don't connect. Or someone is causing these incidents and doesn't want us to figure out what they're doing. Who? Military testing? Maybe. But why test over civilian airspace? Why not use restricted areas or offshore ranges? And if it is military, why not just tell the FAA so we can coordinate? Riley had no answer for that. They sat in silence for a while, both processing the implications. Finally, Riley spoke again. I want to compile all of this. Your 17 cases, my notes from the pilots, the technical data from our incident. Put together a comprehensive report that shows this isn't isolated, isn't random, and definitely isn't electromagnetic interference. And then what? Send it to the FAA? They're the ones pushing the EMI explanation. Then we go higher. National Transportation Safety Board, Congressional Aviation Committees, someone who can't just file it away. Nora looked at him seriously. Riley, if you do that, you're done. The FAA doesn't like people who go outside the chain of command. Your career in ATC would be over. Maybe, but if we don't do something, these incidents are going to keep happening. And eventually, one of them might not end with everyone landing safely. You're sure about this? Riley thought about those 20 seconds of silence. 20 seconds when he'd been responsible for aircraft in Class B airspace and had no way to see them, no way to prevent conflicts, no way to do his job. 20 seconds when something had passed through controlled airspace moving at speeds that should have been impossible. I'm sure. Over the next 2 weeks, Riley and Nora worked quietly. Riley contacted the other pilots from that night. United 737 and Delta 2156. Both confirmed similar observations. Fast-moving metallic object, extremely high speed, invisible to radar. Both had filed reports and been subtly discouraged from making a big deal about it. Nora gathered documentation from the 17 other incidents she'd found. Some were remarkably similar to Philadelphia's event. Others had variations, different shapes described, different speeds, different durations. But all shared the same core elements: radar failure, pilot visual observation, recording system malfunctions. They also noticed something else. The incidents were increasing in frequency. 3 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 per year. Last year, 6. This year so far, 9, including Philadelphia. Whatever this is, it's accelerating, Nora said during one of their meetings. Either someone's testing something more frequently, or more of these things are showing up. Or people are getting better at recognizing and reporting them. Maybe all 3. On October 3rd, Riley finished his comprehensive report. 47 pages documenting the Philadelphia incident in detail, cross-referencing similar events at other airports, analyzing the technical impossibilities of the official explanations. He included statements from pilots, radar data, camera footage gaps, and expert analysis from Nora's operations perspective. The report made one thing clear: Something was operating in controlled airspace that didn't behave like any known aircraft, that could evade or disable detection systems, and that appeared to be doing so with increasing frequency. Riley sent the report to 3 places simultaneously: the FAA's Aviation Safety Hotline, the NTSB's Incident Reporting System, and the office of a congressman who sat on the House Aviation Subcommittee. Then he waited. The response came faster than expected, but not from any of the agencies he'd contacted. On October 8th, 5 days after Riley submitted his report, 2 men in dark suits appeared at Philadelphia International's administrative offices. They asked to speak with ATC Supervisor Riley Kincaid, privately. Riley was on his day off, but the call came to his cell phone at 10 a.m. The airport director's secretary, her voice apologetic. "Mr. Kincaid, I'm sorry to bother you on your day off, but there are federal investigators here asking to speak with you. They say it's urgent." "What agency?" They didn't specify, just said they're investigating your recent report regarding the September 17th incident. Riley felt his stomach tighten. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He called Nora on the drive over. "Those federal visitors you were worried about? They're here." "Damn, what are you going to tell them?" "The truth. Everything I put in the report. If they're actually investigating, maybe that's a good thing. Or maybe they're here to shut you up. Only one way to find out." The 2 men were waiting in a conference room on the airport's administrative floor. Both appeared to be in their 40s, both wearing those generic dark suits that screamed federal agent. The older one stood when Riley entered, extending his hand. "Mr. Kincaid, I'm Special Agent David Morrison. This is Special Agent Jennifer Park. We're with the National Intelligence Division of the Department of Defense. Thank you for coming in on your day off." Riley shook hands with both agents, his guard immediately up. National Intelligence Division. That was way above the FAA level he'd expected. "Happy to help, though I'm surprised DoD is interested in a radar malfunction." "We're interested in the report you filed," Morrison said, gesturing for Riley to sit. "The 47-page analysis of anomalous aerial events at civilian airports. It's quite comprehensive. I thought someone should connect the dots. Indeed, and you've done an admirable job, which is why we're here." Morrison opened a slim folder. "Mr. Kincaid, we need to talk about operational security and the proper handling of sensitive information." Riley felt cold. "The information in my report came from official incident reports and public statements. There's nothing classified in it." "That's where you're wrong." Agent Park spoke for the first time. Her voice crisp and professional, the pattern you've identified, the correlation between radar failures and unidentified aerial phenomena. That analysis itself becomes sensitive when you aggregate it the way you have. You've essentially created a roadmap of events that certain parties would prefer remained disconnected. Certain parties like who? "Like the people responsible for ensuring national security," Morrison said. "Mr. Kincaid, I'm going to be direct with you. The events you've documented are real. The objects you and others have observed are real. And the fact that they can disable or evade our detection systems is very real and very concerning. But broadcasting this information through unofficial channels creates problems. Problems like public awareness. Problems like panic. Problems like adversaries learning about vulnerabilities in our air traffic control systems. Problems like commercial aviation suffering because passengers are afraid to fly." Morrison leaned forward. "You filed your report out of concern for aviation safety. We understand that. But there are larger security considerations at play." Riley met his gaze steadily. "Then maybe you should tell me what these objects actually are. Because the official explanation of electromagnetic interference doesn't hold up to scrutiny." The 2 agents exchanged a glance. Then Morrison spoke again. "What I'm about to tell you is classified. You'll need to sign a non-disclosure agreement before we continue. Are you willing to do that?" Riley hesitated. Signing an NDA would legally bind him to silence, but it might also get him actual answers. "Will I be able to continue doing my job?" "Yes. Your position is not in jeopardy, provided you agree to certain restrictions on how you discuss this matter going forward." "What kind of restrictions?" "You won't share your report with anyone else. You won't discuss the incidents publicly or with media. You won't conduct any further independent investigation. In exchange, we'll brief you on what we actually know, which is more than you might expect." It was a devil's bargain. Silence in exchange for knowledge. But Riley had come this far. If there were real answers available, he needed to hear them. "Show me the NDA." Agent Park slid a document across the table. Riley read it carefully. Standard non-disclosure language, penalties for violation, legal jargon about national security. He signed it, feeling like he'd just crossed a threshold he couldn't uncross. Morrison took the signed document and put it in his folder. Then he looked at Riley with an expression that was almost sympathetic. "The objects you observed on September 17th are not ours. They're not Russian, not Chinese, not any nation's technology that we're aware of. We've been tracking these phenomena for approximately 8 years, and we still don't know what they are or where they come from." Riley felt the room tilt slightly. "You're saying they're not human?" "I'm saying we don't know. They exhibit flight characteristics that exceed anything in our technological capability. They can accelerate instantaneously, move at hypersonic speeds, and apparently interfere with electronic systems in ways we don't understand. They appear primarily around military installations and civilian aviation hubs, which suggests intelligence and purpose. How many incidents are we talking about?" "Documented by DoD, over 400 in the past 5 years. Your report identified 17 at civilian airports. We have records of at least 60 more that weren't formally reported. Add military encounters, and the number gets much larger." Riley absorbed this. 400 incidents. This wasn't isolated, this wasn't rare. This was something happening regularly, worldwide, and being actively suppressed. "Why is this being kept secret?" "Because we don't have answers," Park said. "Imagine the reaction if the government announced that unidentified objects are routinely entering controlled airspace, disabling our detection systems, and we have no idea what they are or what they want. The public panic would be significant. Aviation industry would suffer, and our adversaries would see it as a vulnerability to exploit. So, the solution is to pretend it's not happening. The solution is to investigate quietly while maintaining public confidence in aviation safety," Morrison corrected. "Which is what we're doing. We have teams studying these encounters, analyzing data, trying to understand the technology involved. But it's slow work, and we can't share preliminary findings that might be wrong or might cause panic." Riley thought about this. "Where does my report fit into all this?" "Your report is actually quite valuable. You've identified patterns we hadn't fully recognized. The correlation between radar failures and visual sightings, the consistency of descriptions across different witnesses, the increasing frequency. That analysis is helpful, but it can't be public. So, what happens now? Now you go back to your job. You continue to document any unusual incidents through official FAA channels, but you don't compile analyses. You don't reach out to pilots from other airports, and you definitely don't send reports to Congress." Morrison's tone was firm, but not threatening. "In exchange, we'll keep you in the loop. If we learn something significant, if there's information that's relevant to aviation safety, we'll share it. And if I don't agree, Then, we'll have to take steps to ensure you don't compromise ongoing national security investigations. Those steps could include suspending your security clearance, which would end your ATC career. We'd prefer not to do that. You're good at your job, and the aviation system needs competent professionals. But we will protect classified information. It wasn't really a choice. Riley could agree to their terms and keep his career, or refuse and lose everything while accomplishing nothing. The report was out there in the system. It had been read. That might have to be enough. I'll agree to your terms, but I want one thing. What's that? If one of these objects poses an immediate danger to aircraft, if there's a near miss or worse, I want to be able to take action without worrying about classification. Aviation safety comes first. Morrison considered this. Fair enough. If there's an immediate safety threat, you act. You protect the aircraft. We'll deal with the classification issues afterwards. Agreed? Agreed. The agents stood. The meeting was over. As Riley was leaving, Park called after him. Mr. Kincaid, for what it's worth, your report was solid work. In a different world, it would have led to a real investigation. But this isn't that world. Riley drove home in a daze, his mind churning. Everything he'd learned, everything he'd documented, was real. The government knew. They'd been tracking these objects for years, and they had no idea what they were dealing with. He called Nora from his car. We need to talk, not on the phone. They met at a park, walking paths away from anyone who might overhear. Riley recounted the meeting, the NDA, everything Morrison and Park had told him. 400 incidents, Nora said quietly. Jesus Christ. And that's just what they've documented. Could be more. What are we supposed to do with this information? We can't tell anyone. We can't investigate further. We just, what? Pretend we don't know? That's exactly what they want us to do. Riley kicked at a pebble on the path. But Nora, here's the thing. They confirmed it's real. Whatever happened on September 17th, whatever's been happening at airports worldwide, it's not weather, not drones, not foreign aircraft. It's something we don't understand, and it's getting more frequent. That should terrify me more than it does. Why doesn't it? Because at least now we know we're not crazy. At least now we know there's a reason for the silence. She stopped walking. But Riley, this means we're on our own. If something happens, if one of these objects causes an accident or near miss, the government isn't going to protect us. They're going to protect the secret. I know. They walked in silence for a while. Finally, Nora spoke again. So, what do? We do our jobs. We watch the skies. We document everything through official channels. And we prepare for the possibility that one day, one of these things is going to do more than just observe. You think they're observing us? What else would you call it? They show up at airports, military bases, places where we have concentrated aviation activity. They disable our detection systems so we can't track them properly. They move in ways that demonstrate incredible technology. That's not random, that's reconnaissance. Reconnaissance for what? Riley had no answer for that. But over the next few weeks he thought about it constantly. Why would unknown objects surveil human aviation infrastructure? What were they looking for? What were they learning? The questions gnawed at him, even as he returned to the routine of his work. October passed. November arrived. Philadelphia's airspace remained busy, and Riley's team handled the traffic with their usual proficiency. Then, on November 23rd, it happened again. Riley was on duty, supervising the evening shift. Traffic was moderate, the night before Thanksgiving, with aircraft positioning for the holiday rush. At 8:34 p.m., Maya Torres was working approach control when her radar screen flickered. "Supervisors, I've got intermittent returns on the approach sequence." Riley moved to her station immediately. The radar showed 6 aircraft on approach, but the returns were stuttering, painting normally for a few seconds, then dropping out, then reappearing. "How long has this been happening?" "Just started, maybe 10 seconds. Riley grabbed the phone to technical operations. "Tech Ops, Tower. We're seeing intermittent radar returns on approach. Need immediate system check." "Copy, Tower. Running diagnostics now." On the radio, a pilot's voice. "Tower, American 11634. We're experiencing TCAS fluctuations. System showing traffic, then no traffic, then traffic again." Another voice. "Tower, JetBlue 891. Same here. TCAS is glitching." Riley's pulse quickened. This was different from September. Not a complete dropout, but something interfering with multiple systems simultaneously. "All aircraft on approach. Maintain visual separation and continue as instructed. We're investigating system anomalies." Then Maya's voice tight. "Riley, look at this." On her screen, a new return had appeared. It wasn't following any logical flight path, it was simply there, at 9,000 feet, moving south to north at a speed the system calculated as 1,887 knots, over 2,000 miles per hour. "That can't be right," Maya said. "Nothing moves that fast at that altitude except missiles." Riley stared at the return. It was painting clearly now. A solid target moving through Class B airspace on a trajectory that would take it directly through the approach corridor. "American 1634 Tower. Do you have visual on traffic at your 12 o'clock 1,000 feet above?" "Negative, Tower. TCAS shows no traffic. Visual is negative." The return on the radar was moving closer to the approach path. Riley made a split-second decision. "American 1634, turn right, heading 180 immediately. JetBlue 891, turn left, heading 360. All aircraft in the approach sequence, I need immediate heading changes now." The pilots responded without hesitation, trusting his instructions even without understanding why. Professional aviators following the controller's guidance because that's what kept everyone alive. The radar return passed through the space where the aircraft had been seconds earlier. Moving impossibly fast. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The radar system stabilized, TCAS systems returned to normal. The interference, whatever it had been, was over. "All aircraft, you can resume normal navigation. I'll have amended clearances in a moment." Riley's hands were shaking. He'd just vectored aircraft away from something that might not have been there. Or might have been very much there, and simply invisible to conventional detection systems. He'd acted on instinct, on gut feeling, on the growing understanding that radar didn't always tell the whole story. Maya looked at him. "Did that just happen?" "Yeah. And we're going to document every second of it." The incident report took 3 hours to compile. Intermittent radar returns, TCAS malfunctions on multiple aircraft, unidentified high-speed target that appeared briefly then vanished. Riley included radar screenshots, radio transcripts, timing data. This time, he sent it only through official FAA channels. No comprehensive analysis, no cross-referencing with other incidents, just the facts of what had happened tonight. The response came the next morning. Brief, bureaucratic. Incident attributed to temporary system anomaly. No safety impact. Aircraft maintain separation. No further action required. System anomaly. The same sanitized explanation they always used. Riley called Nora. It happened again. How bad? Bad enough that I had to vector aircraft away from something I couldn't see, something the radar painted as moving over 800 knots. Jesus, anyone get visuals? No, but I think that's because whatever it was didn't want to be seen this time. September, it made itself visible. Last night, it stayed hidden. That's not random, Nora. That's adaptation. Adaptation to what? To us. To how we watch for them. It's learning what we can and can't detect, what makes us react, what we ignore. It's testing our responses. That's a terrifying thought. Yeah, and it's only going to get more frequent. He was right. Over the next 6 weeks, Philadelphia experienced 4 more incidents, each slightly different, each demonstrating characteristics that shouldn't be possible. Radar returns showing impossible speeds, aircraft systems experiencing brief malfunctions, pilots reporting distant lights moving in ways no aircraft should move. Riley documented everything, filed every report, watched as each one was explained away as technical anomalies, weather phenomena, or instrument errors. But he also started noticing something else. Other controllers were beginning to talk, quietly, carefully, in break rooms and parking lots. They were seeing things too, things they couldn't explain, things that didn't make the official reports because nobody wanted to be the controller who saw UFOs. Riley reached out to some of them, controllers he trusted, people who'd been in the field long enough to know the difference between normal anomalies and something genuinely strange. The conversations were always careful, always deniable. But a picture emerged. This wasn't just Philadelphia. It wasn't just the airports Nora had identified. This was widespread, possibly global. Controllers at facilities across the country were experiencing similar incidents. Brief radar failures, unexplained targets, system malfunctions coinciding with unusual visual observations. Something was happening in controlled airspace, something systematic, something that seemed to be studying human aviation operations. And the only people who could do anything about it, the controllers who saw it firsthand, were being told to stay silent. On January 9th, 2023, Riley received a call from a blocked number. When he answered, a familiar voice. Agent Morrison. Mr. Kincaid, I'm calling to update you on developments related to our October conversation. I'm listening. The incidents you've been documenting in Philadelphia, we're seeing the same pattern at facilities nationwide. The frequency is increasing significantly. Whatever these phenomena are, they're becoming more active. Why are you telling me this? Because we're forming a working group. Controllers, pilots, analysts, technical experts. People who've witnessed these events and can provide operational insight. Your name came up as someone who understands both the technical side and the security implications. Would you be interested in participating? Riley's heart rate increased. What would participation involve? Monthly meetings, probably virtual, analysis of incident data, input on detection and response protocols, all classified, all under strict NDA. But you'd be part of the effort to actually understand what we're dealing with instead of just watching it happen. I'm in. Good. You'll receive a briefing packet within 2 weeks. Welcome to Project Skywatch. The call ended. Riley sat in his apartment, staring at his phone. Project Skywatch. An official acknowledgement that this was real, that it was being studied, that people were taking it seriously. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was better than silence. The first Project Skywatch meeting took place on January 24, 2023, via secure video conference. Riley logged in from a borrowed office at Philadelphia International, using encrypted credentials that had arrived via courier 2 days earlier. When the video connected, he found himself looking at a grid of faces, controllers from facilities across the country, pilots from commercial and military backgrounds, analysts whose agency affiliations weren't specified, 23 people total, all of them united by the same experience. They'd seen something in the skies that shouldn't exist. Agent Morrison served as the meeting facilitator. His introduction was brief and direct. Thank you all for participating. This working group was created to address a phenomenon that's been occurring in American airspace with increasing frequency. We call them UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. You all know them by more direct terms. The objects that appear on radar briefly, the lights that pilots see moving at impossible speeds, the things that cause our systems to malfunction in ways we can't explain. Our mission is twofold. First, to understand what these phenomena are and what they represent. Threat assessment, technology analysis, pattern recognition. Second, to develop protocols for how aviation professionals should respond when encountering them. Detection, communication, safety procedures. Everyone in this meeting has witnessed UAP incidents firsthand. Your operational experience is invaluable. Over the next hour, we're going to share data, compare experiences, and begin building a comprehensive picture of what we're dealing with. For the next 90 minutes, Riley listened to accounts that mirrored his own experiences. A controller from Seattle described radar failures during UAP appearances. A pilot from American Airlines described a near miss with an object that accelerated from stationary to supersonic in less than 2 seconds. An analyst from an unspecified agency showed collision probability models that suggested multiple unreported close encounters. The pattern was undeniable. UAP incidents were happening regularly in controlled airspace around major aviation hubs. The objects demonstrated capabilities that exceeded human technology by decades, possibly centuries. They appeared to be conducting surveillance of aviation operations, and they were becoming bolder. One question that keeps coming up, said a female controller from Denver, is whether these things are hostile. I mean, they're invading controlled airspace, interfering with our systems, coming dangerously close to commercial aircraft. That seems hostile to me. Or it could be indifference, suggested one of the pilots. Like how we fly over ant colonies without considering whether the ants think we're hostile. Maybe, to whatever's controlling these objects, we're just not that important. Morrison intervened. We don't have enough data to assess intent. What we can say is that despite hundreds of documented encounters, we have no confirmed cases of UAP directly causing aircraft accidents. They approach closely, they observe, but they don't attack. That suggests either restraint or lack of hostile intent. Or they're not done gathering information yet, Riley said, speaking up for the first time. Everything I've observed suggests these objects are conducting reconnaissance. They appear near airports and military bases, places with concentrated aviation activity. They disable or evade detection systems so we can't track them effectively. They're learning about our capabilities, our procedures, our technology. That's what you do before an operation, not after. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Morrison spoke. That's one hypothesis, and it's one we take seriously, which is why this working group exists. We need to understand what they're learning, why they're learning it, and what we should do if their behavior changes from observation to something more active. The meeting continued for another hour, covering technical details, reporting procedures, data sharing protocols. By the end, Riley felt both enlightened and disturbed. Enlightened because he finally had confirmation that this was real, widespread, and being taken seriously at high levels. Disturbed because the people in charge, the government agencies, the military, the aviation authorities, had no more answers than he did. When the meeting ended, Riley sat alone in the borrowed office, processing what he'd learned. Then his phone rang. Nora Bennett. How'd it go? They confirmed everything we suspected. It's real, it's widespread, and nobody knows what to do about it. That's reassuring. There's more. They're asking us to be part of a working group. Monthly meetings, data sharing, protocol development, all classified. Us? They want me involved too? Your name came up. Your analysis of the camera failures, your operational expertise. Morrison said they'd be reaching out to you. Nora was quiet for a moment. Riley, are we sure we want to be part of this? Once we're officially involved, we can't unknow things. We can't walk away. I don't think walking away is an option anymore. Whatever this is, it's not going away, it's accelerating. And if we have a chance to help figure it out, to maybe prevent an accident or worse, I think we have to take it. Okay, I'm in, but I hope you're right about this. Me too. Over the next 3 months, Riley participated in 6 more Project Skywatch meetings. Each one revealed new data, new incidents, new patterns. The working group was building a comprehensive database of UAP encounters. When they occurred, where, under what conditions, with what effects. Several patterns emerged. UAP incidents were 73% more likely to occur during low visibility conditions. Night, fog, heavy cloud cover. This suggested they preferred operating when human visual detection was reduced. Radar failures during UAP encounters were not random. Analysis showed the failures occurred in a specific sequence. Backup systems first, then secondary radar, then primary, as if the UAP were systematically disabling detection capabilities in order of priority. UAP showed increased activity around airports during periods of high traffic density. They appeared during rush hours, during holiday travel, during weather events that caused arrival and departure backlogs. This suggested interest in observing how humans managed aviation operations under stress. Multiple UAP had been observed communicating, if that was the right word. On 4 occasions, 2 or more objects had appeared simultaneously, moved in coordinated patterns, then departed together. This indicated intelligence, cooperation, possibly a hierarchy of purpose. The working group also discovered something disturbing. The technology gap was widening. When incidents first began being documented 8 years ago, the UAP moved at speeds only slightly beyond human capability. Mach 3, maybe Mach 4. Recent observations showed speeds exceeding Mach 10, with instantaneous acceleration and deceleration that would generate G-forces fatal to any biological pilot. Whatever controlled these objects was either non-biological or had mastered technology that protected occupants from forces that would turn human bodies to liquid. On April 15th, during the 7th Project Skywatch meeting, an Air Force colonel briefed the group on military encounters with UAP. His presentation included gun camera footage from fighter jets, radar data from multiple installations, and testimony from pilots who'd attempted intercepts. The footage was striking. UAP moving in ways that violated physics, as Riley understood it. Right-angled turns at high speed, hovering motionless, then accelerating to hypersonic velocity, descending from 80,000 feet to sea level in seconds. In one video, a fighter pilot attempted to pursue a UAP. The object appeared to notice the pursuit, stopped instantaneously, then shot straight up and disappeared. The pilot's frustrated commentary was audible. Where did it go? How did it do that? These objects, the colonel said, demonstrate capabilities we assess to be 50 to 100 years beyond current human technology. Propulsion systems that don't appear to generate exhaust or heat signature. Energy sources of unknown type, materials that don't match anything in our databases. Whatever built these things has access to science we haven't figured out yet. After the presentation, Riley raised his hand. Colonel, has there been any attempt at communication? If these things are intelligently controlled, has anyone tried to make contact? Multiple attempts, the colonel replied. Radio transmissions across various frequencies, light signals, mathematical sequences broadcast via radar. No response. Either they can't understand us, they choose not to respond, or they're communicating in ways we can't detect. Or they're not interested in communication, suggested one of the analysts. Maybe they already know everything they want to know about us. We broadcast our communications constantly: radio, television, internet, radar, everything. They could learn our languages, our technology level, our social structures, all without ever making contact. Communication implies exchange. Maybe they don't have anything to exchange. The thought was chilling. Humanity as an open book, observed by intelligences that saw no need to introduce themselves because we held nothing of value to them. In May, Philadelphia experienced its 11th incident since September. This one was different, more intense. Riley was supervising the night shift when, at 2:17 a.m., every radar screen in the facility went dark simultaneously. Not intermittent, not flickering, completely dark. And this time the darkness lasted not 20 seconds but 3 full minutes. "All systems down," Maya Torres reported, her voice controlled but tense. "Primary radar, backup radar, ASDEX surface radar, all dark, we're blind." Riley initiated emergency procedures. "All aircraft, Philadelphia Tower. We are experiencing complete radar outage. All aircraft maintain last assigned altitude and heading. Report your position and any conflictions." The radio became chaos. Pilots reporting positions, asking for guidance, some sounding worried. 27 aircraft in Philadelphia's Class B airspace, and Riley's team couldn't see any of them. "Use dead reckoning," Riley told his controllers. "Last known positions, standard speeds, estimated current locations. Talk to the pilots, build a picture." For 3 minutes, Riley's team worked like controllers from the 1950s, before radar, using pilot reports and mental calculations to maintain separation. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Pure air traffic control, stripped of technology, dependent entirely on communication and spatial reasoning. Then, at 2:20 a.m., the radars came back online. Every aircraft appeared exactly where the controllers had calculated they should be. No separation violations. No conflicts. Everyone safe. But the radio chatter was explosive. "Tower, American 1847. We just saw something. Object at our altitude, maybe 500 feet off our right wing. Bright white light, hovering stationary. We passed it doing 320 knots and it didn't move. Tower, Southwest 2119, confirming visual. We saw it too. White spherical light, maybe 20 feet diameter, just hanging there in midair." Tower, Delta 993. We also observed the object. It appeared to be pacing our aircraft briefly, then stopped and held position as we passed. 3 aircraft, 3 separate visual confirmations. An object hovering at altitude, in controlled airspace during a period of complete radar failure. Riley keyed his radio, forcing his voice to remain calm. "All aircraft, thank you for those reports. Continue your approaches and landings. Tower will investigate and follow up." But even as he spoke, he knew what the investigation would find. Nothing. No radar data because the systems had been dark. No camera footage because the security systems would show the same 3-minute gap. No physical evidence because whatever that object was, it would be long gone before anyone could reach the location. After the shift, Riley sat in his car in the parking lot, too wired to drive home. His phone rang. Morrison. "I heard about tonight." News travels fast. Philadelphia's radar outage triggered automatic alerts. Multiple agencies were notified immediately. What did the pilots see? Riley recounted the visual reports: white spherical light, hovering at altitude, multiple witnesses. That's consistent with other recent encounters, Morrison said. The objects are becoming more visible, more willing to be seen by aircraft crews. That's a behavior change. Previously, they maintained distance or appeared only briefly. Now, they're positioning themselves where pilots can get clear visuals. Why the change? We don't know. Maybe they've completed their covert observation phase and no longer care if we see them. Maybe they want us to see them. Or maybe... He trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe they're preparing us for something, getting us accustomed to their presence. That's one hypothesis our behavioral analysis team is working with. Preparing us for what? That's the question everyone's asking, and nobody has good answers. Riley drove home as sunrise was breaking over Philadelphia. He thought about those 3 minutes of darkness, when 27 aircraft had been invisible to the controllers responsible for their safety. He thought about the white sphere hovering in controlled airspace, watching aircraft pass by. He thought about the increasing frequency of incidents, the changing behavior, the sense that something was building toward... what? Whatever was coming, it felt close now. The quiet observation phase was ending. Something else was beginning. On June 3rd, Riley attended what would be his last Project Skywatch meeting for reasons he couldn't have anticipated. The meeting's tone was different from previous sessions. Morrison seemed tense, and several of the usual participants were absent. When everyone was logged in, Morrison began without his usual preamble. We have a development. 48 hours ago, a commercial aircraft flying from Chicago to Miami experienced a close encounter with a UAP. Closer than anything we've previously documented. The object paced the aircraft for approximately 7 minutes, maintaining a distance of less than 200 feet from the wing. Passengers photographed it. Crew observed it clearly. And this time, the airline can't suppress the story because the passengers are already posting images on social media. Morrison shared his screen, showing photographs clearly taken from aircraft windows. The images showed a metallic disc-shaped object hovering just beyond the wing, reflecting sunlight. The object appeared solid, structured, unmistakably manufactured. These photos are going viral as we speak, Morrison continued. Major news outlets are picking up the story. The FAA will have to make a statement. The cat, as they say, is out of the bag. Riley felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief because the secret was breaking open. The silence was ending. Dread because he had no idea what would happen next. "What's the FAA going to say?" asked one of the controllers. The official statement will acknowledge the incident, confirm that safety was not compromised, and state that the object is under investigation. They won't use terms like UAP or unidentified spacecraft. They'll keep it vague, non-alarming. But the photos are clear. People can see what it is. People can see what it looks like. That doesn't mean they'll know what it is or where it came from. There will be speculation, theories, debate. But without official confirmation, it remains ambiguous. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing communication strategies, public response protocols, how aviation professionals should handle increased questions from passengers and media. But Riley could sense the underlying reality. The secret was breaking down. The carefully maintained silence was crumbling. After the meeting, Riley called Nora. "Have you seen the photos from the Chicago-Miami flight?" "Everyone's seen them. It's all over the news." "Riley, this is what we wanted, right? Transparency. People knowing the truth?" "I thought it was. But now that it's happening, I'm not sure the world is ready." "Ready or not, here it comes." Over the next 2 weeks, the incident dominated aviation news. The FAA issued multiple statements, each one carefully worded to avoid commitment. "The object has not been identified. Investigation is ongoing. Aviation safety remains our top priority. But behind the scenes, everything was changing. More pilots were coming forward with their own experiences. More controllers were sharing their stories. The dam had broken, and years of accumulated incidents were flooding into public awareness. Riley received calls from media outlets wanting interviews. He declined them all, bound by his NDA. But he watched as other aviation professionals, people not restricted by classification, told their stories. The public reaction was mixed. Skepticism, fascination, fear, and a growing demand for government disclosure. On June 22nd, Riley's phone rang at 7 a.m. Morrison, but his voice was different, harder. "Mr. Kincaid, I need to inform you that Project Skywatch is being terminated effective immediately." "What? Why?" "Because it's been compromised. Someone in the working group has been leaking information to journalists. Details that were discussed in classified meetings are appearing in news articles. We can't maintain operational security anymore. So what happens to everyone involved? Your participation is officially concluded. Your NDA remains in effect. You will not discuss Project Skywatch, its meetings, or any information shared during those sessions. Violation will result in legal action. And the UAP incidents, what happens with those? They'll continue to be documented and investigated through separate channels, but the collaborative approach we were attempting, that's done." The line went dead. Riley sat in his kitchen, coffee growing cold, processing what had just happened. Project Skywatch, the one official effort to understand and respond to UAP incidents, had been shut down. Whether by bureaucratic decision or deliberate sabotage, the result was the same. The people who'd been working to find answers were being scattered and silenced. But the UAP weren't stopping. If anything, incidents were increasing. Philadelphia experienced 3 more encounters in July, 4 in August. By September, 1 year after the first incident Riley had witnessed, the working assumption among controllers was that UAP appeared in their airspace multiple times per week. They'd become almost routine. Almost normal. Almost. On September 17th, 2023, exactly 1 year after the 20-second silence, Riley was supervising the evening shift when something unprecedented happened. At 9:47 p.m., the same time as the original incident, every communication system in the tower went silent. Not just radar, not just cameras, everything. Radios, phones, intercoms, even the digital clocks. Complete communication blackout. Riley looked at his team. They were all frozen, staring at dead screens, silent radios, a tower that had suddenly become isolated from the outside world. Then, through the tower windows, Riley saw it. A massive object, hovering about 1,000 feet above the airport. It was disc-shaped, maybe 300 feet in diameter, with lights around its perimeter that pulsed in patterns. The object was solid, structured, undeniably manufactured. And it was just sitting there in plain view above one of America's busiest airports. "Everyone to the windows," Riley said quietly. His team gathered, all of them staring up at the impossible object floating above their airport. No one spoke. What was there to say? For 2 full minutes, the object hovered. Then its lights brightened, pulsing faster, and it began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster, accelerating upward until it was just a point of light, then gone. The communications systems came back online all at once. Radios crackled with confused pilot voices asking what had happened, asking if tower was there, asking for guidance. Riley keyed his microphone, forcing his voice to remain professional. "All aircraft, Philadelphia Tower. We experienced temporary communication outage. Systems are restored. Stand by for instructions. He issued clearances, vectored aircraft, restored normal operations. But his hands were shaking, and he knew everything had changed. They'd been seen, not by 3 aircraft reporting brief glimpses, by an entire airport. By controllers, pilots, ground crews, passengers, probably thousands of witnesses who'd looked up and seen something that shouldn't exist. The official investigation would begin within hours. Statements would be taken. Explanations would be attempted. But there would be no explaining away what Riley and his team had witnessed. After his shift, Riley stood in the parking lot one more time, looking up at the sky above Philadelphia International. Clear night. Stars visible between scattered clouds. Normal sky. Ordinary sky. Except it wasn't. Not anymore. Because now Riley knew with absolute certainty that humans shared the skies with something else. Something that watched us, studied us, and seemed to be preparing for what? He thought about that 20-second silence 1 year ago. About all the incidents since then, about the increasing frequency, the changing behavior, the sense of building towards something. The silence was breaking. The secrets were surfacing. And humanity was about to discover that our controlled airspace had never really been under our control at all. Riley pulled out his phone and called Nora. "You saw it," she said immediately. Not a question. Everyone saw it. Tower crew, ramp workers, pilots, probably half the airport. That thing was just sitting there above the field for 2 full minutes. What happens now? Now everything changes. They can't keep this quiet anymore. Too many witnesses. Too much visibility. The silence is over, Nora. And that's good? Riley looked up at the stars again. I don't know, but at least it's true. The incident made national news within hours. Videos taken by witnesses. Clear, unambiguous footage of a large, structured object hovering over a major airport went viral. The FAA issued statements. The Department of Defense issued statements. Congress demanded briefings. The wall of silence, maintained for years, finally crumbled. Riley Kincaid never gave media interviews about his experiences. His NDA prevented that. But he continued working air traffic control, watching the skies, documenting incidents that were no longer suppressed or explained away. Because on September 17, 2022, 20 seconds of silence revealed that humanity's understanding of controlled airspace was fundamentally incomplete. And on September 17, 2023, 2 minutes of visibility proved it. The skies had never been empty. We'd just been looking away. Now, finally, we were looking up. And whatever had been watching us all along seemed content to be seen. The question that remained, the question that kept Riley awake at night, was simple. What happens next?